Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
$10 billion, that's the figure that Donald Trump is suing the BBC for their fake news, as he would put it. We will find out what all the details of that are here on Talk Drive. We'll talk as well about the adverts and subscriptions in the BBC. Could they subsidise the licence fee? That is something that the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, isn't ruling out as their charter is reviewed. What do you think about all of that? We'll have a chat about the UK activists chanting "Long live the Intifada" hours after the Bondi Beach attack. I mean, what goes through these people's heads, or not goes through these people's heads, when they think about this? I mean, it is just pure anti-Semitism. It is absolutely dreadful. It is to be condemned entirely. And the Bondi shooter apparently preached radical Islam as a teenager. Video shows no huge shock there. We'll talk about the junior doctors ignoring calls to scrap their 5-day strike. That starts tomorrow at 7 o'clock. We'll have a defender of the junior doctors from a pro-doctors organisation called Just Treatment. We'll also get all the details as well about the Liverpool parade attacker Paul Doyle, who has been sentenced to 21 years and 6 months in prison. We'll get all the details about that. We'll talk as well about the US telling Ukraine, take our platinum security guarantees or lose them. The sport as well, we'll talk about that. We'll also be discussing Labour telling Dale Vince, their donor, that he should apologise for linking the Bondi attack to Israel. We have asked Dale Vince if he will come on our programme this evening. So far there has been no answer, but he's welcome any time between now and 7 o'clock to tell us why he thought it was a reasonable thing to do to talk about Benjamin Netanyahu essentially hiding behind anti-Semitism. We'll talk about the exact details of what Dale Vince said as the programme goes on. There's lots to talk about this evening. I want to make sure that you get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock here on Talk Drive. Well, unsurprisingly, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has said that he is suing the BBC. This is after their Panorama documentary that doctored a clip that made it look as if he was calling for people to fight against members of Congress. Donald Trump says he's suing the BBC for $10 billion. These are the words of the President.
In a little while you'll be seeing I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth, literally. They put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something. So we'll be bringing that lawsuit. A lot of people are asking, when are you bringing that lawsuit? Even the media can't believe that one. They actually put terrible words in my mouth having to do with January 6th that I didn't say. And the beautiful words that I said, right? The beautiful words, talking about patriotism and all of the good things that I said, they didn't say that, but they put terrible words. They actually have me speaking with words that I never said, and they got caught because I believe somebody at BBC said, this is so bad, it has to be reported. That's called fake news. So we'll be filing that suit probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Well, the lawsuit is now filed. That was yesterday. The President was speaking, and he says it is defamation and a violation of Florida's Deceptive and Unfair Trade Practices Act, claiming $5 billion in 2 different cases. It's been filed in the Southern District of Florida, which I think will be interesting in all of this, because the statute of limitations, the time, excuse me, basically when you have to sue someone is a year in the UK, but in America it's 2 years in this regard, in this particular aspect of the law anyway. He has said the lawsuit alleges it is a false, defamatory, deceptive, disparaging, inflammatory and malicious depiction of Trump. It is apparently the BBC guilty of a long-standing pattern of manipulating President Trump's speeches and presenting content in a misleading manner in order to defame him. Well, we know certainly that in 2021 on the 6th of January he made that speech, and there were 54 minutes between what he said and what he was portrayed in the Panorama documentary, and previously on Newsline it would appear as well to have said. I want to talk to Suzanne Franks now. She's a former BBC broadcaster and a professor of journalism at City University. I have to declare an interest in that. I will be doing some teaching myself at City University next year. It is important that I make that clear. Suzanne, thank you for joining us this evening. What do you make of this, and what do you think is likely to happen, given that previously Donald Trump had filed lawsuits against CBS, against other broadcasters as well, CNN? He's fond of doing this.
Yes, he's very fond of doing it, and he's made quite a lot of money, as we said, from other broadcasters and other media organisations. I think it's completely over the top. I mean, $10 billion. You know, that's more than the entire BBC income in a year.
Yeah, it's interesting
all those
because
licence fees would go towards.
They get about £6.5 billion a year, but I mean, he's within his rights to do it, is he not?
Well, I suppose he's within his rights. The question is whether it's realistic, and whether it's going to, you know, the BBC I think are going to fight it, and whether in the end it's going to come to anything. They're probably just going to waste a lot of money or spend a lot of money in legal fees.
Yeah, I just wonder how you think this sort of ends up, essentially, because the Director General and the Chief Executive of News have gone, Tim Davie and Deborah Turness. Do you think that's enough, or is it actually reasonable to say, well, hold on a second here, this is more than that, it's more than the apology that the BBC has put out, and actually he is within his rights to sue?
Well, you know, obviously he's within his rights to sue in Florida. He wouldn't be able to sue here. But America's got a very high bar on these kind of cases. I mean, defamation in America, you've got to prove a lot more than you would have to in the UK, because of all their emphasis on freedom of speech and so on. And also, he's, as a public figure, he's going to have to prove malice, that somebody actually deliberately wanted to hurt him in this way. And the point is that it actually didn't harm him, did it? Because he still got elected with a very high vote just after this programme was aired. So how did it actually damage him?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had some reaction already to this. Paul has said, I do wish that everyone would stop saying stupid things like any money Trump gets from the BBC would come from British taxpayers. Using that ridiculous analogy, you could never sue the NHS for botched operations, the police for wrongful arrest, the judiciary for wrongful conviction. The list is endless. Of course it comes from taxpayers. Everything comes from us taxpayers, says Paul in Belfast. I mean, it's interesting, certainly, that I think Paul has some very good points there. What do you think would be a reasonable amount, Suzanne, or what would be a reasonable apology, some sort of charitable donation? I don't know. What do you think would work properly for the BBC to properly apologise to Donald Trump for doctoring his words? For that is what they did.
Well, I think they have apologised, and I think they made quite a fulsome apology. The key question, as far as I'm concerned, is why did it take so long for this to come out? Because you remember, there was not a single complaint about this programme, and it's over a year now that we ended up talking about it. And somebody in the BBC should have woken up earlier to this and done something about it. So I think that's what they need to apologise for now. But I mean, the point about the taxpayers' money, obviously it's not taxpayers' money, it's licence fee payers' money, and it's all about proportion, isn't it? Proportionality. Do you seriously want a whole year of BBC income to go into the pockets of the President of the United States?
So what would be reasonable, do you think, Suzanne, especially when it comes to these kind of settlements?
You'd have to ask a lawyer. You'd have to ask a lawyer, wouldn't you? You'd have to ask somebody who works as a defamation lawyer. But I would have thought maybe some kind of notional charitable donation might be appropriate. But I think the key point is they need to make another effort at apologising and explaining why nothing was done about this much sooner.
You, I know, would be absolutely horrified if anybody on a team that you had worked on had done something like this. I'm sure your students would be horrified. I'm sure the faculty and every colleague you've ever met would be horrified. I work for the BBC, and I mean, this is just so, it wouldn't have entered my head as a BBC employee or as a journalist now to do something like this. In terms of the scale of it, especially against the President of the United States, do you think that is something that the BBC gets? Do they understand that, okay, yes, look, their Director General and Head of News have gone, that is a major reason, and that certainly is something that a major effect of this. But does the organisation understand how incredibly difficult this is, do you think?
I think they've slowly, but as usual with the BBC, it's always taken them too long. As I said, they should have woken up to this and done something about it months ago when it was first. I mean, apparently it was first made evident to people with inside the BBC way back, I think, last May. I mean, that's to me, that's the real issue. You know, it was a terrible thing to do, but I mean, when it happens, you've always got to own up to these things and do it as fast as possible. It's always the cover-up and the kind of dilly-dallying that leads to the.
I often feel that way. I often feel that way about organisations, not just the BBC, but a lot of large organisations that are slow to act, slow to take responsibility, and they know eventually this may well come out and probably will come out. And I do think, I mean, if you look at, I'm not comparing the two incidences, but another crisis the BBC has had in recent months is the Greg Wallace crisis. And I mean, that was an independent production company as well. But the point is, complaints were made over a 17-year period. That's just not a failure of what Greg Wallace did. It's not just a failure of someone doing an edit they shouldn't have done and doctoring that footage. It's actually a failure of management and process as well, isn't it, Suzanne?
Oh, of course it is. It's a failure of process and a failure of, when it happens, terrible as it is, not to grasp the nettle and to sort of really then decide we're going to have to own up and we're going to have to do something, rather than just sort of stick your head in the sand and have another committee meeting.
Okay.
But going back to the point about how terrible this is, I mean, it was an awful thing to do, and I'm just hoping that no student of ours was anywhere near making that kind of error.
Suzanne, thank you very much indeed. Suzanne is a former BBC broadcaster and professor of journalism at City University. Mark in Norfolk says, why is Trump taking the BBC to court? Trump, very much like an ex-wife, is taking the BBC to court because the process is in itself the punishment, a simple act of revenge and not just for financial gain. Well, he's within his rights to do it, and he was wronged. There's no doubt about that. Now, they have apologised to him. Maybe that should be enough, but he's done this on a number of different occasions. He previously filed a separate lawsuit against CBS, the American network, also for $10 billion, alleging the network deceptively edited an interview on the programme 60 Minutes with his Democratic rival in last year's presidential campaign, Kamala Harris. Paramount, which owns CBS, settled the lawsuit, agreeing to pay out $16 million, obviously substantially less than that, in fact not even 1% of what he was claiming for. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with all of this. What do you think, and how much money, if any, should Donald Trump get in all of this? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Dawn says, people are criticising Trump about the lawsuit. Just think about what happened. The BBC fabricated Trump's speech. The USA is our friend. Our publicly funded state broadcaster is a disgrace. Becca in Norfolk says, I find it absolutely ridiculous. The BBC felt the need to cut and shut a video of Trump speaking. The bloke has enough holy crap moments on social media, on Air Force One and in the White House. So the BBC has brought this lawsuit on themselves, says Becca in Norfolk. And Mark in the same county says, why is Trump taking the BBC? Oh no, sorry, I've just read that out a minute ago. I just didn't take it off my screen. Right then, what do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. We will certainly speak to we'll take your calls, texts, voice notes as well. Don't forget the voice notes, less than a minute, please. Send them in. One thing I'm really interested in, which we're going to talk about in a second, is the view of Sophie Ellsworth, who is a colleague of mine I've only got to know in the last few days. She is News Corps' Australia-Europe correspondent, so she works for Sky News Australia. She's a really, really good commentator, and I'm interested to hear what she thinks about these horrendous, horrible people, these activists in Oxford, at Oxford University, chanting, "Long live the Intifada," hours after the Bondi attack. We know a bit more detail now about the shooter preached radical Islam as a teenager as well, and was influenced, of course, by radical Islam, as we have known for some time, of course, really since these attacks happened. And we will talk to Sophie in just a second. But in the meantime, I just want to speak to Mark in Glasgow, who's given me a ring about the BBC. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Right, well, looking at the Panorama programme content, this was no accident. This was deliberately done, and also deliberately released 1 week before the American elections. A similar trick was pulled on Farage before the last elections in the UK. They released some made-up scandal story but he managed to deflect it and deal with it. But unfortunately for us, the BBC is in a no-lose situation, because if they are found guilty, well, we pay. If they're found not guilty, whatever happens, it costs them nothing. And watching their behavior over the last few month or two since this became a topic of news, they haven't changed. They're still doing the same old stories, still doing the same old.
Is this institutional, do you think, Mark?
It is totally institutional. I've stopped watching the BBC completely for UK news. I occasionally switch to the BBC just to see how they are handling a news story, and it is chalk and cheese in terms of what goes on. The BBC are, without a doubt, completely captured by wokery, quite left-wing, very anti-anything that would be called by Starmer hard right, in other words, normal men and women. And I think, Trump has had years of the Democrats laying lies, disinformation against him, etc. And I think that Trump is having to deal with that. A lot of people in the UK don't like Trump, but what they don't like is the image of Trump that was put about for 10 years by the Democrats. Trump, actually, as a businessman, is going to hopefully save the Western world. Because
how much should he get from the BBC, do you think? Because these other lawsuits, previously sued for $10 billion and got 16 million. Would 16 million pounds, for example, or $16 million be a reasonable compensation for what happened to him? What do you think?
I don't think that's the issue, and thanks for asking that. But I think the truth of it is, I think you should get as much as you can get off them, and in the only hope that it means that serious numbers of heads will roll at the BBC. If this happens, if he gets $1 billion or $2 billion, then there was going to be some serious root and branch cutting at the BBC, and that's what really needs to happen. And none of that has happened. The top two went. And all the people who made the Panorama program, all the people who read out the news and sneer when they mention Trump or Farage or anything else, they're still there. They're all still there. They're all still going for it because there's no consequence. And so the amount of actual damages is not the issue. I, for one, if Trump wins this, I shall simply stop paying my TV license so that the money I've got won't go to them. One thing quickly, though, we just spent a week in Egypt. And globally, the BBC is all over the place. Globally, Egypt, BBC 3 channels. No one's paying for that.
Yeah.
We're paying to fund the BBC around the world for free access around the world and for them to push their woke message. I'm sorry, no. That needs to stop.
Okay, Mark, thank you. That's Mark in Glasgow there. I think with the BBC World News, there is some sort of deal that distributors pay. They do pay something for it, but it's not nearly as much as we pay here in the UK, and certainly people who receive that channel and various other channels they'll pay for it as part of a package, but it won't be nearly as much as the licence fee. Trevor in Harrow says, good afternoon, Peter. Although a lot of people in the media are furious that Donald Trump is suing the BBC, let's remember, although he is rich, he is fighting on behalf of millionaires, of us who could never afford to take the BBC to court. And I'm sorry, millions of us who could never afford to take the BBC to court. And let's be honest, they've made some outrageous claims before. Jackie says, after spending a full day in A&E on Friday, and to quote the consultant on shift, calling it the Wild West, I don't know how anyone can defend these junior doctors. It looked more like a war zone with patients screaming for pain relief on trolleys in the corridors, doctors knowing that striking will cause harm and suffering, and I wonder if they walk out, are these people really the people we want caring and treating patients when they're at their most vulnerable? Jackie, you make a very, very good point there. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. We're also going to talk about Australia and the fallout from the massacre of the anti-Semitic horrendous terrorist attack at Bondi Beach. Stay with us.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Bob in Surrey's been in touch on Twitter and says your caller Glenn was spot on. Name and shame the production company. I think the caller was on with Ian Collins. The production company is called October Films. That is the production company that made the panorama for the BBC. Davy Rees from West Kirby in the Wirral says, I'd like to see Trump bankrupt the BBC. Simon says, maybe if the BBC stopped calling it a mistake, it would be a start. This was no mistake, it was a malicious act. Well, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. I want to talk now about some of the reaction to the horrendous anti-Semitic terror attack in Bondi Beach in Australia. We were talking about this on Sunday, and one of my colleagues I didn't know before, but I know now, and will certainly be on my programme on hopefully numerous occasions in the future, such as the quality of our analysis, is Sophie Ellsworth, who is News Corps Australia's Europe correspondent and contributor to Sky News Australia as well. Sophie, it's great to have you back on the programme. And I know that Oxford University students and activists from your party, which is the Jeremy Corbyn Zara Sultana outfit, took part in a demonstration during which protesters chanted "Long live the Intifada" hours after the deadly terrorist attacks on Bondi Beach in Australia. It is horrendous, it is shameful, and yet again I think it illustrates the level of anti-Semitism there is not just in the UK but obviously in Australia as well.
Absolutely it does, and it's really concerning that these things are going on. Now, apparently this protest was organised prior to the Bondi Beach attacks, but anyone with a little bit of a heart would think this is not okay to take part in this, given the atrocities that happened at Bondi Beach on Sunday evening that has changed Australia forever, Peter. This is something that will fundamentally shift the mood in Australia for a very long time. We are a broken nation. This does not happen in Australia, thankfully. And now it finally has, where we had Jews hunted down by these two gunmen looking to kill them. And now we are a country in absolute mourning. And this is when we are hoping the world will stand with us and fight against what is going on.
Tell us what your Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has been saying. He talked about the Bondi Beach gunmen likely to have been motivated by Islamic State ideology. We know that one of those flags was found in their car at one point alongside the improvised explosive devices and the guns that they used. This is probably fairly obvious that they were motivated by Islamic State ideology, but there's a whole train, there's a whole number of years where radicalisation appears to have happened, isn't there?
There absolutely is. So there was the father and son, two of them, that went on this murdering rampage on Sunday. Now, we know that the father was shot dead and the son has just come out of a coma. Now, he was known to Australian authorities, the ASIO authority, which is our intelligence force, back in 2019 for concerns over his links to Islamic terror. However, he wasn't considered a risk at the time. Now, there's going to be questions raised on what he and his father were doing, because they spent a month in the Philippines just prior to this horrific massacre that took place in Bondi Junction or Bondi Beach, where they were undergoing training with these extremist groups. So how on earth were they able to do this? And then how were they able to get down to Bondi Beach, one of the most populated hotspots in summer? It was a hot summer's day. and go on a rampage for at least 6 minutes before police intervene. There are so many questions that are yet to be answered.
And what's your assessment? Obviously, there's anger directed at them, and correctly so. But what is your assessment of the anger directed at the authorities here as well?
Well, it's very early to be criticising the police because we don't know exactly what took place. But we do know, Peter, that on that day, when that Jewish festival was going on, there were about 1,000 Jews down there at Bondi Beach. There were 2 police officers on duty at that festival, 2, among 1,000 Jews. Now, anyone with any remote realisation of how serious anti-Semitism is in Australia would realise that is not sufficient. So there's definitely focus on authorities, but our Prime Minister has been accused of being weak when it comes to tackling anti-Semitism. And some commentators in Australia, Peter, have said when he's come out and spoken about this attack, it's like he's just reading lines off a script. Where is his heart in this? So the focus is definitely on him because he aligned with the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and other countries to recognise Palestinian statehood before all the hostages were released from Gaza.
Yeah, they made a choice. They made a choice in all of that. I want to ask your opinion on one of the big controversies here in the UK about a Labour donor, a man called Dale Vince. He's been on this station a number of times. He's given many, many millions of pounds to the Labour Party. I just want to read out the tweet that he sent, which we can put, I think, on the screen now as well. If I can just do that, and I will read this out. To be clear, Netanyahu blamed Australian government policy for the terror attack at Bondi Beach. I find that outrageous. Australians surely will too. I pointed out what I believe to be obvious and unlogical thing. An obvious and logical thing. It is far more likely that Israeli policy, not Australian policy, is the cause. In due course, we may find out as one attacker is in custody. I very much doubt he will cite Australia's recognition of Palestine as his reason for attacking Jewish people. Netanyahu is trying to gaslight us all and tries to use this atrocity to support his arguments. I find that morally repugnant as well as ideological. If I've not been clear enough, I condemn all acts of terror and all forms of racism. Yeah, I don't think you have been clear enough, but I'd love to speak to Dale Vince about that. We've asked him on the programme today. Well, Stephen Kinnock, who is a health minister, Labour health minister, has called on the Labour donor to apologise for the comments. Let's hear what he told our colleagues at Times Radio this morning.
Vince should apologise for that. It is completely wrong to somehow imply that the Jewish people should be blamed collectively for the actions of the Israeli government, and he should apologise for that. I haven't taken any.
Should the Labour Party take money off him?
Well, let's see. First of all, let's ensure that Dale Vince does come forward and apologise for those remarks, and we will then review the position and take it from there.
I wonder what you make of that, Sophie, certainly as someone who is from Australia, this collective blame that Dale Vince appears to be putting on the Jewish people for the actions of Israel.
Unbelievable, really. I mean, this is a country that is broken. This is a country that cannot understand how this happened, despite the fact that anti-Semitism has been allowed to fester. There are so many broken families. There are Jewish people in Australia scared. There are people who don't feel safe now. There's people who don't want to go to Bondi Beach ever again, one of our most iconic destinations. And to hear comments like this, perhaps he should think about those comments and the ramifications of them, and perhaps the Labor Party should rethink about who is donating money to them, because to shift blame here is really quite appalling.
Sophie, as ever, thank you very much indeed. That's Sophie Ellsworth there, who is News Corps Australia's Europe correspondent. She's a contributor to Sky News Australia as well, so thank you to her. We will return to that story, of course. We're also going to speak to the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun in just a second about junior doctors, about what Rishi Sunak has been saying. Public sector pay rises at the fastest pace on record, no great surprise there, but redundancies hitting the highest level since COVID. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk about the junior doctors' strike now. It's happening tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. I would imagine that the Prime Minister's questions tomorrow in the House of Commons, that is the last one before Christmas. Keir Starmer will be asked about it by Kemi Badenoch. I'll be here in the studio in Julia Hartley-Brewer's programme at noon tomorrow. We will, as we always do, look at Prime Minister's questions, and I'll be giving my verdict on that. So Julia and I will do that alongside Claire Pearsall, who's her regular guest. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has said that doctors, junior doctors, should ignore their union and go to work. This is what the Health Secretary has been saying.
I am appealing to ordinary resident doctors to ignore the BMA strike and go to work this week. Abandoning patients in their hour of greatest need goes against everything a career in medicine is meant to be about. The entire focus of my department and the NHS team is now on getting the health service through the double whammy of flu and strikes.
Wes Streeting there, the Health Secretary, speaking to the House of Commons. Ryan Saby is with us, the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun. He's also the Economics Editor. We're going to talk about some of the economics of today as well in just a second. Ryan, a very clear appeal there from Wes Streeting for people to essentially cross picket lines.
Yeah, that's right. We're on the eve of junior doctors, or those resident doctors, going on strike, and that's a very heartfelt plea from Wes Streeting to say to them, look, you know, even though the strike action has been backed by the union, there was that overwhelming vote in the last couple of days. You don't actually have to go forward with this, you know, appealing to doctors on an individual basis. And it'll be interesting to see how many actually go across that picket line tomorrow morning to actually try and help patients. Because Wes Streeting has been adamant about this. How much one of his big plays is to try and bring down waiting lists. Now, every time there is a strike, those waiting lists don't come down. It costs the NHS more money, and it just puts everything on a back burner. So it's going to be very interesting to see how many people heed his advice and actually go through with it tomorrow.
It'll be very interesting to see. That starts at 7 a.m. and of course there'll be full coverage right throughout the day, including of Prime Minister's questions, where I would imagine it'll come up. Just talk us through what Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister, has been saying about tax rises being the price of pandemic support. Obviously, he as Chancellor and then Prime Minister put a huge amount of money into pandemic support.
Yeah, that's right. We all remember Rishi Sunak when he made that incredible Downing Street appearance during the pandemic, where this big scheme, something called furlough, that many people hadn't even heard of that word before, and there it was going to pay a big chunk of everybody's wages for the coming weeks, and I think you know almost over a year for a lot of people. He has told the COVID inquiry that there is a political price, a political choice for putting that money towards people's wages, and part of that price is the fact that he had to freeze tax thresholds. Rachel Reeves got criticism for it just the other week in the budget. Take you back to 2021, 2022. It was Rishi Sunak who was the first Chancellor to do that, because before then, those pay bands, those tax thresholds went up with inflation every year. So it didn't seem like the tax take was as big. But Rishi Sunak, he had to find some money from somewhere. And that almost seemed like it was a hard decision to take, but possibly not as hard as actually putting up those rates of headline rates of income tax. So he says there's a choice to pay. It was never he was never going to save everyone's job, but he difficult circumstances. He kind of did the best he can to save the economy, and look, we're paying a big price for it now.
I know you're the economics editor of The Sun as well. We've got a number of different financial stories and market stories and job stories as well. Redundancies hitting the highest level since COVID, public sector pay rises at the fastest pace on record, and 5.1% unemployment. This is not good economic news.
No, exactly. And those figures sort of taken up until the sort of run up to the budget hitting 5.1%. They're up, and it's another month of really bad news. And we have inflation figures out tomorrow. We have a Bank of England interest rate decision on Thursday. I mean, the Chancellor really will be hoping that the Bank of England cut that base rate by 0.25%, just to give her a little bit of breathing space. But everywhere the Chancellor turns, there's people criticising her for last year's budget. We're feeling the full effects of the national insurance rise. Businesses up and down the country, whatever size, are complaining about the rise to the sort of the national living wage, the national minimum wage, which has made it more difficult to actually more costly to employ people. We're sort of seeing the full effects of that playing through. Now, the Chancellor will say lots of big projects, infrastructure projects, like Heathrow, film studios here and there, but that will take time for that to feed through. Lots of people desperate for some good news now, and it's for the time being, it seems like it's going to be very, very difficult. Now, there was one poll out today that suggested that sort of business activity could pick up after the budget because people know where they are going. They've got some certainty, but let's just see how that pans out in the coming weeks and months.
Tell us about this technology deal between the US and the UK.
So this is interesting because one of the big things in September that the Prime Minister had to shout about was this sort of trade deal, this technology deal between himself, between the Prime Minister and Donald Trump. It was the showpiece of his state visit. It was to do with technology and how we could bring closer ties with America. Now, it seems like America have actually walked away from this deal. Downing Street very, very adamant today to say that conversations ongoing, but it seems at sort of a high end, America feel like there's some reluctance on the UK side to talk about certain aspects of the trade deal. I think America see the basis of this deal, but want to go a little bit further. But the UK wants to sort of iron out a few things here or there. So at the moment, it seems like it's pretty tense between the two countries, and it raises all sorts of questions about the special relationship.
Yeah, certainly, and we'll talk more on the programme about Ukraine and Russia and all of the aspects of the military too. For the moment, Ryan, thank you. That's Ryan Saby, who's Deputy Political Editor of The Sun. He's also their Economics Editor at the paper as well. I want to play a voice note now. You can send these in 0344 499 1000. Elisa in Chelmsford has these thoughts on the BBC.
Mark from Glasgow absolutely nailed it about the BBC. They are complicit in propaganda, in telling lies, in putting words in the United States president's mouth. For goodness sake, why should we be paying for it? The whole business model needs to be changed. It should be made a private subscription model, and none of us should be put in prison for not wanting to pay our TV licence. Now, I do pay for it, but I don't want to pay for it, but I don't want to get arrested. So, something needs to be done, and if it takes President Trump to teach them a lesson, then so be it.
Thank you, Elisa. Appreciate that voice note. Let's speak to Ian in Bridgend, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Ian, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hello, Peter. Can I wish you and everybody at Talk a happy Christmas?
You absolutely can, and a very happy Christmas to you and yours as well.
Oh, thanks. President Trump, he's done it again. It's all part of his strategy, isn't it, to de-wokeify and improve free speech here in the Western world.
So you're on his side, clearly, Ian.
Oh, definitely, yes, definitely. Well, on two fronts, I'm a big supporter of Trump, and I don't pay the licence fee. I don't watch any live TV, don't record it. And
how long have you not paid your licence fee for, Ian?
I think I'm into my second lot of receiving the notification from the BBC to say yes, you don't require it. So I was about possibly 3 to 4 years now.
Right, okay. Yeah. And no regrets? You think that's the right decision?
Oh, definitely. I just listen to Radio Wales occasionally for the weather, and they do a bit of a lefty politics programme on a Sunday, but that's it. As far as the BBC TV is concerned, no, I leave it well alone. And I'm a much happier boy as a result.
Okay, so you're behind Trump then. How much do you think he should get? I mean, if he gets $10 billion, that could take the whole of the BBC's income for 1 year, more than that. Would that worry you at all, Ian?
Well, the thing is, I would have thought a large part of the payout will come from their insurance policy. The difficulty
that's part of it.
They've been very sort of magnanimous with their apologies early on. So, you know, one would hope that they've consulted with their lawyers and their insurance company, but knowing how dull and arrogant they tend to be, I wouldn't be so sure.
OK, Ian, thanks for your thoughts there. I appreciate that. That's Ian at Bridgend joining us on the show, 0344 499 1000, the number he called. Let's hear another voice note from Carl.
No sympathy whatsoever for the BBC. They've got a long history of twisting stories and putting, let's be honest, lying and just not telling the truth about different aspects of the news and saying bad things about people that they don't agree with politically when they're supposed to be unbiased. I pay my licence fee just because that's the thing I do. I always pay everything that I should pay. But to be quite honest with you, I can't think of anything better I'd rather my money go on than to pay off Donald Trump, to be honest with you. As far as I'm concerned, it'll be the first time that my licence fee money has done something constructive.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate that. Thanks also to Dawn, who says hatred of Israel and Jews has been normalised in many countries. Anti-Israel protests with hideous anti-Semitic chants go unpunished. Sadly, Jews are unsafe everywhere now. Howard says, great show as usual. I'm getting beyond enraged with these ongoing marches, these extreme groups. Oxford students last night chanting long live the Intifada, anti-Semitic at the very least. For me, a terrorist chant. If you try to converse with them, which you can't, they would have no real idea what they're chanting for, just brainwashed sheep. Nothing is done about them by the police. Guaranteed I would be arrested if I chanted an opposite view, condemning them and Hamas. Tracy says, please leave the Jews alone. Didn't they and others suffer enough during the war? Shame on those murderers, says Tracy. Well, listen, thank you for all of those messages. We'll get to more of those. We'll also talk about Liverpool and Paul Doyle, the attacker there, sentenced to 21 years and 6 months in prison. We'll get analysis from Danny Shaw, the police and crime and justice commentator, in just a second. Stay with us.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I remember the 26th of May this year in fact, an absolutely horrendous event. It was supposedly a wonderful day for the people in the city of Liverpool FC's Premier League victory, but of course more than 130 people were injured, and really the last few days we've heard their impact statements. We've heard about the actions of Paul Doyle, who has now been sentenced to 21 years and 6 months in prison for driving his car into that crowd, injuring so many people. We're going to hear just a little summation of what happened and how it all went through the process from our news team. There is a small error. They say he's from West Kirkby, but actually he's from West Derby. Let's hear about Paul Doyle and let's hear what happened on the 26th of May.
53-year-old Paul Doyle will serve more than 20 years in prison after driving his car into the crowds of the Liverpool title parade back in May. The club and its fans were celebrating their 20th English League title when Doyle of West Kirkby ignored road signs to drive into fans and civilians in attendance. Doyle wept in court on Tuesday afternoon as he heard witness statements, and Judge Andrew Menery KC passed down his sentence.
The total sentence which I impose upon you is one of 21 years and 6 months imprisonment.
Doyle had pleaded guilty to 31 separate counts, including dangerous driving and causing grievous bodily harm with intent. 134 people were affected. The court was told the youngest was just 6 months old. The child escaped without injury. Liverpool-based journalist Tony Evans spoke to TalkSport after the sentence was passed down.
When listening to the judge detailing the scale of the injuries to the victims, and you know, listening to the horror of it all, I must say I'm not surprised that 21 years and 6 months was imposed.
Judge Andrew Menery KC says Doyle's actions turned an occasion of collective enjoyment into one of fear and disruption that causes damage to the reputation of the city of Liverpool. He also says it had an adverse impact on businesses and was committed in the presence of children.
It is almost impossible to comprehend how any right-thinking person could act as you did. To drive a vehicle into crowds of pedestrians with such persistence and disregard for human life defies ordinary understanding.
A crucial part of evidence was Doyle's own dashcam footage retrieved on the day of the incident. Here's Detective Chief Inspector John Fitzgerald of Merseyside Police.
In my 20 years of police service, this is the most distressing and graphic footage that I have come across. It was really difficult to watch for me and the whole of the investigation team. But it was really important that we did.
Paul Doyle, aged 53, will serve 2/3 of his sentence in custody. Then he'll spend the remaining time on licence under certain conditions. It means the soonest he'll leave prison is 2040, when he is 67 years old.
Well, that was Tom Clayton there, our reporter who went through all of the detail there. Danny Shaw is a police and crime and justice commentator. Danny, this was just a dreadful thing. I remember it happening. I was on air when it happened, and I was talking to Kevin O'Sullivan about it right throughout the evening with all the details of what happened here. 134 people affected, the youngest just 6 months old. It just defies belief. What on earth possessed him to do that?
Well, bewildered is, I think, the apt sort of word, and apparently that is what Paul Doyle's neighbours and friends and family feel about what happened. They just can't understand how this man, who's led an apparently law-abiding life for around 30 years, he had some convictions when he was a young man, including convictions for violence, for biting a man's nose, so serious crimes, but that was many years ago. They can't understand why he did what he did. The police just believe, and I think the judge has said it, that he lost his temper and he got into a rage. He was trying to pick up friends from the parade, and he wanted to get through the crowds, and he was just determined to do so. And even though he paused during the driving on a couple of occasions and he could have stopped, he carried on ploughing into people. It's a miracle that no one died.
It is a miracle, you're absolutely right. Some of the victims' impact statements have been just absolutely heart-rending, haven't they, Danny? Just what has stood out for you?
I think what has stood out for me is number of victims. 29 victims were sort of part of the prosecution case. Over 130 were struck or injured in some way. When you hear the list of the injuries, multiple fractures, infections, permanent disability, concussion, bruising, and then the mental health impacts, trauma, nightmares, flashbacks. The judge said there was a lasting legacy of fear, injury and loss among those who had been injured by Paul Doyle's actions. It's just the sheer scale of it. This isn't one or two people, even though that would be bad enough. But this is, over 100 people who will have lasting effects from what he did that day. And they will be affected, and their families and their friends and communities will all be impacted as well. The consequences are huge across Liverpool.
Absolutely, and it is very interesting to hear that the senior Merseyside police officer, Detective Chief Inspector John Fitzgerald, we heard some of his words there in the report by Tom Clayton there. It's difficult to comprehend the devastating impact events of that day have had and will continue to have on many people. They're talking about the physical problems and also the mental health issues of this as well. And Liverpool FC releasing a statement saying that they would like to remind supporters that a variety of free resources are available for anyone affected by this incident to access to care for their mental health. We will continue to cover this story if more details come out. Absolutely horrendous story. It was just dreadful. I remember it happening. Maybe you could tell us as well about the Metropolitan Police, Danny, because they are set to strike on New Year's Eve.
Well, the Met aren't striking on New Year's Eve, but staff working at the central
civilians
command,
who work with them. Apologies.
Yeah. But police officers aren't allowed to strike. They won't be going on strike. But about 175 workers who staff the control rooms as call handlers, office staff, administrative assistants, people who work on vehicles and fleet technicians, they will be going on strike from 6 a.m. on New Year's Eve to 7 a.m. on New Year's Day. So 25 hours strike. This is all because of a dispute about pay. Now, police officers have received a 4.2% pay rise for this year. The civilian staff from the Met are still in dispute about what they're going to get. They've been given two offers, one of 3.8%, another of 4.2%. One has got various strings attached to it. One, I think, hasn't. So there's still a sort of an argument going on there. And Unite, the union, says that they don't want to do this. But they do foresee serious disruption, because of this strike, and if it goes ahead. I should just say there's still a couple of weeks to go, so there's a possibility, I suppose, of further negotiations and a resolution to this, and the strike being called off. But at the moment, it's going ahead. I imagine that the Met will have sufficient time to get backup staff. Perhaps some police officers will have to work in control rooms, and they could call in agency workers, I guess, as well.
Do you think this will have an impact on, it's one of the busiest nights of the year for the Metropolitan Police. Do you think this will have an impact on the service that people receive?
I think they'll have contingency plans. I think they probably got long enough to be able to make do somehow. Possible to know whether it won't have any impact at all. But I think the Met, being the Met, they're pretty good at dealing with a crisis. And they're pretty good, when they've got something they have to plan for. So I think they can probably get through it, yeah.
Danny, thank you. That's Danny Shaw there, police crime and justice commentator. I appreciate you joining us on Talk this evening. Jackie's been in touch and says, why is this epidemic of anti-Semitism only happening in the West? The same attacks, the same script from the politicians and the same inaction which lets this cancer fester. Why? Jackie, it's a very, very good point. Amanda says, Dale Vince is just another useful idiot, completely blinded to all reason by a self-righteous arrogance. Well, we have asked Dale Vince on the programme this evening. We haven't got an answer from him just yet. If we get an answer between now and 7, we will let you know what that is. I'd love to interview him at his convenience between now and 7 o'clock about that message that he put on Twitter. Steve in Birmingham says, although I do not agree with the doctor's strike, I also believe the government is gaslighting the public about the flu numbers to create more panic and bad feeling towards the doctors. It would be interesting to know the real numbers about flu. I think you'll find the positive swabs are being reported, not the number of people actively being treated for flu. I trust the government even less than I trust the NHS. Unfortunately, I'm a nurse who worked for the NHS for 20 years, says Steve in Birmingham. Steve, that is a very interesting point, and I do think that if the NHS can't cope with another 2,500 people, well, we're in serious difficulty. I mean, flu season comes around this time every year. Yeah, it's about 3 weeks earlier than usual. We've heard that, certainly. But if the NHS is an absolute crisis because of that, well, that is something that should not happen. Martin says 8 years no terrestrial TV for me, Peter, legally, says Martin. Thank you to another person who says it's beyond comprehension that in the light of the most recent atrocities committed in Bondi Beach, Keir Starmer is today speaking about new laws to control hate speech against Muslims. How about new laws to prevent hate speech against Jews? Very good point from that person, so thank you for that. And Adrian in the Isle of Wight say, people keep saying the edit did not affect his election. The fact is it compounded the myth that no one in the UK liked him. It must have had a bad influence on how people see President Trump. So thank you, Adrian, for that. We'll continue to talk about that story. Mark Littlewood is the director of the pop columns Popular Conservatism, and will talk to us about all of that as well. Donald Trump, of course, saying he's suing the BBC for $10 billion, 2 separate lawsuits that will be filed in Florida, or have been filed in Florida. We'll talk about that in the next hour. We'll also be talking to Tobias Elwood about what is happening in Ukraine, and an Armed Forces chief issuing a stark warning as the Russia threat grows. We've heard quite a lot of this over the last few days, certainly. We'll also be speaking to a patient leader with Just Treatment, which is a campaigning organisation, about why he believes junior doctors deserve another pay rise. What do you think? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thanks so much for your company here on Talk. It's just gone 5 o'clock. There's an awful lot to talk about today, including the $10 billion that Donald Trump wants to sue the BBC for. We'll get the views of Mark Littlewood, the director of the Popcorns, Popular Conservatism, in just a second. We'll also reflect on what the Armed Forces Chief has issued a stark warning, the Russian threat growing. Get ready to fight, that's what he says. There have been quite a number of these calls over the last few days, and a whole of society effort is needed to deter the Russian threat, we are told. We'll also speak to a campaigner for an organisation called Just Treatment, Matthew Hulbert, who's no stranger to my programmes. He has said that there is a case, he believes, for junior doctors to get even more money. We'll get the sport as well this hour, and we'll talk more about the UK activists chanting "Long live the Intifada" hours after the Bondi attack as well. Absolutely disgraceful stuff. As always, I want to hear from you. I want to get your voice on the air. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message, less than a minute please, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk Drive. Well, let's hear from the man himself, the President of the United States, what he has said he will be doing. We know those lawsuits have now been filed with the Florida courts on 2 separate counts. One is defamation and the other is for another $5 billion on a separate count. This is what Donald Trump has been saying about suing the BBC within the last 24 hours. In a little while you'll be seeing I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth, literally. They put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something. So we'll be bringing that lawsuit. A lot of people are asking, when are you bringing that lawsuit? Even the media can't believe that one. They actually put terrible words in my mouth having to do with January 6th that I didn't say. And the beautiful words that I said, right? The beautiful words, talking about patriotism and all of the good things that I said, they didn't say that, but they put terrible words. They actually have me speaking with words that I never said, and they got caught because I believe somebody at BBC said, this is so bad, it has to be reported. That's called fake news. So we'll be filing that suit probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Donald Trump there, and since he made those comments about a day ago, they have filed the lawsuit, a $10 billion lawsuit, and this is alleging the BBC broadcast a false, defamatory, deceptive, disparaging, inflammatory and malicious depiction of Trump. The clip, of course, broadcast a week before the 2024 presidential election. The charge is that it is a brazen attempt to interfere and influence the election to Trump's detriment. It's interesting, you can only sue on this particular thing for a year after the event in the UK, which is perhaps a reason why they decided to sue the BBC in Florida. It was made by the BBC, broadcast by the BBC, but an independent production company put it together, that is October Films. And the BBC, according to Trump's lawsuit, is guilty of a long-standing pattern, it alleges, of manipulating President Trump's speeches and presenting content in a misleading manner in order to defame him. Mark Littlewood is the director of the Popular Conservatism, the Popcorns. Mark, thank you for joining me this evening. What do you think about President Trump's 2 lawsuits? How much should he get, if anything?
Yeah, great question, Peter. I mean, I've seen a good number of lawyers in America who've said that Donald Trump has far more chance of winning $10 billion by buying lottery tickets than he does by actually successfully suing the BBC for that amount of money. So I think we can probably put aside the $10 billion figure. I don't think he'll get anywhere close to that. But if we look at his record to date, he tends to go in hard, ask large, and has, from US media outlets, got settlements running into a good number of millions of US dollars. And I think we've got to think of this as being, if you like, prosecuted in the court of public opinion as it's being prosecuted in a court of law in Florida. So even if Trump were not to prevail or were not to secure the eye-watering damages, I think that's more than the BBC's annual turnover he's asking for in damages. I still think he's got them by the short and curlies. This is going to be an extremely embarrassing episode for the BBC, where they'll all be cross-examined on why did you allow this to happen, why didn't you notice it, who's resigned, why haven't more people resigned. And it's almost putting the BBC in American eyes in line with other sort of rogue state news stations like, you know, Russia Today or Press TV from Iran. So he's basically, we're going to see on trial, is the BBC a trusted media outlet or not? And I think the damage that that will cause the BBC is enormous. Maybe not 10 billion US dollars in cash terms, but it's likely to be a huge blow to its reputation nationally and abroad.
Well, I agree with that, and certainly I worked for the BBC in America for a while, and I know that it had, certainly when I worked there a number of years ago, quite a reputation for impartiality. Many Americans think of the BBC as radio first rather than as than TV, because of course there's so many BBC programmes that go on to a public radio in America, or certainly have in the past. I just wonder what you think the BBC needs to do to restore trust, not just in America, but here in the UK as well. What sort of BBC would you be happy with, Mark? Because we've heard, of course, from the Culture Secretary that adverts and subscriptions on the BBC could subsidise the licence fee. If the BBC is to survive and thrive, what should it actually look like?
Yeah, I think Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, seems to be taking a baby step in the right direction. I prefer she took a leap in that direction. I think it's high time that the BBC became essentially a subscription model. We are told endlessly how trusted and beloved it is, not just in the UK, but across the world. If so, the BBC should have no problems selling voluntary subscriptions in the same way that Netflix do, or sports channels do, or the Disney Plus channel, or Amazon Prime, or whatever else. It should compete in that market. And I think if it started to do that, that's to say that payment for its services were voluntary, it would automatically start to bend towards public opinion. The fact that you have to pay for it really sort of isolates its editorial team. It doesn't really matter if your customers don't like what you're pumping out, because they pretty much have to pay you anyway. The other thing that I think the BBC's got to get right internally, whether it struggles on the licence fee model or adopts a more modern means of financing, is it's got to be serious about diversity in one way, which it isn't serious thus far. It always thinks of diversity as in terms of the mix of different ethnicities or men and women that you might see on your screens. It's usually on your screens rather than in the boardroom that they're worried about. But there is very little diversity of thought. There is very, very few people challenging the orthodoxy.
And class as well.
And class,
I remember, I always tell the story of working at Newsnight at the BBC, and there was a young man who had come in on work experience who, this is germane to the story, young man has black skin, and someone came up to him and said, well, we're doing a story on knife crime, could you help us? At which point he said, I don't know very much about knife crime, I went to Eton. Which sort of told me everything I needed to know about the attitudes that were towards him from some of the staff there.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So, look, it has a certain mindset, and I think it's really, the fork in the road, I think, is this, Peter, is either got to have radical surgery so that it can prove that it really is impartial, that you've got a balance of views, that there's sort of as many journalists around the table who, I don't know, lean towards Brexit or lean towards the centre-right as there are those who lean towards Remain or the centre-left, that you really police that properly, that you make sure that these so-called mistakes don't keep happening. It's worth noting that nearly all of these mistakes seem to be in the same political direction, don't they? They're very rarely in trouble for saying something too pro-Israel or too pro-Trump. It always seems to be that the errors are in one direction, which suggests, at the very least, a subconscious bias.
Well, you're absolutely right. And this was a doctoring of footage. This wasn't something that was slapdash. This is something that is said, right, we're going to take this bit, and then 54 minutes on, we're going to get this bit, we're going to put them together, and not make it clear that there has been a time lapse during that time. So it's much, much worse than a mistake. It's a doctoring.
Yeah, it's definitely not a mistake. It's an editorial decision. Yeah, was made by someone producing this Panorama special. As I keep saying, I'm greatly looking forward to the Panorama investigation into Panorama. That would be a good episode of Panorama. Yes. To really get to the bottom of it. But they've either got to seriously take on this bias rather than sort of saying, oh, a mistake was made, lessons have been learned. They've either got to get serious about that, or frankly, another option is to say, look, the BBC approaches things from a particular editorial angle, from a particular ideological angle or a class angle, or whatever, and we're going to compete with the likes of talkTV and other news platforms and other TV stations in much the same way that our newspapers compete across the sort of ideological and political spectrum. So actually you sort of shrug your shoulders and say, yeah, there is a BBC view of the world, and if you feel simpatico with it, then you might want to buy our products, but if not, don't, in much the same way that you might want to buy The Guardian or not, or The Telegraph or not. So they've really got to make their mind up on this. I don't think there's a halfway house. Yeah. You're either robustly impartial, or you come to the news and current affairs with a particular flavour, in which case you market yourselves to that community, but you get rid of any suggestions that you are the absolutely objective truth as far as news is concerned.
One of my favourite lines about Dennis Thatcher, the husband of Margaret Thatcher, was that he referred to the BBC as M1 and M2, Marxism 1 and Marxism 2. When he was looking at the television, he was quite a character. Tell me about the US suspending the technology deal with the UK, the worries around this and your worries around this, Mark, because the special relationship does seem to be under some form of threat at the moment. We're going to talk in just a second actually about Russia and Ukraine, but economically there are big issues here as well, aren't there?
There are, and so you may remember, Peter, at the time of Trump's most recent state visit, there was an awful lot of fanfare that we've got this grand trade deal all to do with technology, working together on AI and other kind of cutting-edge breakthrough technologies. And that I wouldn't say is in shreds yet, but it's hit the buffers, because the Americans are concerned not so much about things that might impede our relationship in the tech sphere, but a whole range of other restrictions that we have in the UK, like the online safety bill, which is likely to lead to typically American firms facing the heftiest fines, very restrictive rules around food safety. I mean, you would think that everything sold in American supermarkets is poisonous for the way that we ban everything here in the UK, even though when we visit America, we're not picky at all, right? We tend to trust their food. Yeah. So the Americans are worried that we have very restrictive regulations in a whole range of areas preventing American imports. And until those are resolved, they seem to have hit the pause button on this, what would have been a very exciting tech announcement. So moral of the story, if we want the special relationship to work, I think we've got to be serious about respecting American regulations and sort of saying if it's basically passed the test in America as a safe food or as a safe pharmaceutical, that's pretty much good enough for us, and you can sell it in the UK and vice versa. Until you get those sort of understandings, I'm afraid these piecemeal deals, however exciting they sound, are likely to hit the
Although
rock.
That would be that regulatory divergence from other EU companies. Would that not cause problems further down the line if we're importing food or exporting food to EU countries, Mark?
Well, I think my optimal scenario is that we should independently basically recognise EU standards and American standards. These are developed, sophisticated countries, and if your product or service is legal in the EU single market or legal in the United States market, that is basically, there might be one or two tiny exceptions, that's basically good enough for me. If the product and service is good enough for Germans, Dutch, Italians, Texans, Bostonians or New Yorkers, I find it very difficult to understand why we wouldn't want all of those products available in the British market. And we can do that unilaterally. It doesn't require a deal. It just requires us to say, actually, your medicines agency is pretty much as good as ours. If you get the tick box from them, that's good enough for us. We can do an awful lot without having to sign trade deals with the respective flags of the countries signing it behind them for a photo op, just by resetting our regulatory settings. And I would like to recognise the single market and US standards pretty much across the board.
As long as I don't have to eat Hershey's chocolate.
You won't be forced to, but you'll have the right to, Peter.
Mark, thank you. Mark Littlewood there, director of the Popcons, Popular Conservatism. Actually, I lived in New York for a year. It's amazing how many friends you find you have, even people you barely know, who want to come and sleep in your sofa when you live in New York. And at one stage, I actually said, right, the rent is 5 bars of Dairy Milk chocolate and 5 bars of double-decker, of double-deckers, which I'm afraid did not last. Usually the amount of time the person was staying on my sofa, they tend to get snaffled fairly quickly. Thank you to Trevor in Derbyshire, who says Nandy should decriminalise the licence fee. See how many people really support the BBC. I think at least a third wouldn't bother. Leslie says the BBC is a terrestrial TV channel, so should be funded by adverts, as the other terrestrial channels do not by subscription. And Janet in South Wales, I'm delighted, she says, that Trump Trump is suing the BBC. Why should they be allowed to lie to the British public and use their lies to influence political outcomes? I haven't had a TV licence for at least 4 years. Very happy with my decision, says Janet. And Mac in Glasgow, haven't heard from you in a little while, Mac. Good to hear from you. He says, it's absolutely shameful and disgusting that these junior doctors want to go out on strike at a time when the superflu is spiking. Basically, they're happy for people to die so they can get their pay rise. Does this not go against the Hippocratic Oath? Great show, says Mac. Appreciate that. We'll be talking about that in a few minutes' time. But first, we're going to talk about an armed forces chief issuing a stark warning as he believes the Russian threat is growing. We've heard an awful lot about this, certainly, and we'll talk to Tobias Elwood, the former Defence Select Committee Chairman, former Defence Minister, in just a second. Stay with us.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including Georgette, who says, glad the Liverpool attacker got that sentence. He was an idiot and destroyed lots of lives. Also, the Australian incident is horrendous. Thank you for that, Georgette. Peter says, I spoke with my cousin last night who has moved to Dubai with her Jewish fiancé. He actually feels safer there because they don't allow any anti-Semitism. And like it or not, And like it or not, any anti-Semitic potential demonstration is quickly and efficiently stopped. That's very interesting to hear that about Dubai. Wouldn't have expected that. Margaret in Birmingham says Donald Trump is right to sue the BBC. He will win and probably just settle for about £200,000 and then give it to a British charity. And the Donald Trump fan club is backing him. And that is good, says Margaret in Birmingham. Let's talk about the threat from Russia, because there is a very, very interesting comments from the Air Chief Marshal, Sir Richard Knighton. He has warned that Russia's military strength is increasing. It is something to fear. Russian troops are now battle-hardened after spending nearly the past 4 years waging a full-scale war in Ukraine. We also have him saying that a whole-of-society response is needed, including an increase in regular forces, cadets and reserves. Tobias Ellwood is with us, the former chairman of the Defence Select Committee. He's a former Defence Minister too. Tobias, it's interesting, isn't it, that we have quite a number of these military chiefs slightly going off script a little bit, who are saying to our leaders and to the public their belief, as outlined there, that Russia is a much bigger threat than is perhaps being considered already. Why do you think they're doing that? Are these pure motives, or are there other factors at play as well?
Well, good evening. The simple answer is our world is getting more dangerous, and we are simply woefully unprepared. As you imply, when on the same day, in fact, both the head of MI6, Blaise Metraweli, and the head of our armed forces, Air Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, give public speeches about the growing threats to UK security and the rise in direct hostility from Russia, we should absolutely sit up and listen and begin to prepare. They spell out very clearly that that space between peace and war is blurring. We can all see that for ourselves. The world feels like it's getting more dangerous, more hostile.
How is that affecting the UK directly, do you think? You talked about direct hostility from Russia. We've seen, of course, poisoning attacks that have happened over the last few years, but should we be militarily worried about Russia? Is that a fair thing to be worried about?
Yes, it absolutely is. I mean, firstly, let's confirm that our vulnerability comes from how risk-averse we've become over the last couple of decades, how timid the West is in standing up to potential threats, to put the fires out early, not helped, I'm afraid, by President Donald Trump disengaging from Europe, choosing to actively back Russia. And this has energized our adversaries to be bolder in pursuing their own agendas, including the grey zone war that we are.
Do you think it's fair to say that Trump is
impacted here in the UK?
Do you think it's fair to say that Trump is just straightforwardly in support of Russia? He is putting a lot of time and effort with Jared Kushner, with Steve Witkoff, with others, to broker a form of compromise in regard to Ukraine to try and bring an end to the war. That's not necessarily straightforward support for Russia, is it?
I don't agree with that, I'm afraid. From where I sit, we've outsourced European security to President Trump. We've been very patient with our closest security ally, indeed in the spirit in which you suggest, wanting to get a deal to secure Europe's future. But instead, what we're seeing is a president that's actually keen to secure a peace in order that he can then develop a strategy to bring Russia in from the cold. That is absolutely clear. It's in print in America's national security strategy. But the evidence was already there. How he treated the president of Ukraine, halting intelligence support for Ukraine, halting weapon systems going into the country, all the time giving space for Russia to advance its own cause. We've, as I stressed, been very patient, hoping that a deal would be cut. It hasn't. And this is the ideological difference between Europe and America. We recognize that Russia will not stop there if it can claim any form of victory in Ukraine. Okay. And going back to those threats on Britain, Russia is at war with Britain today. Cyber attacks, espionage, sabotage, influence operations, cutting of undersea cables. I'm just concerned it's going to take an acute event, a drone strike, a deniable drone attack, for example, for us to simply wake up and recognize that Russia is in a grey zone war against the UK.
If that happened, Tobias, if there was a drone strike, for example, or something of that nature that occurred, surely the obvious answer would be to go to our closest military ally, which is America, a fellow NATO country. If we cut ourselves off from the United States, or we disengage actively from that, where does our support come from? Because we have so many of these leaders, military leaders, saying that we just don't have the troops, and it would take years to build that up, and the capability and investment too, which our economy doesn't have.
So there's two separate things there. There's firstly dealing with Ukraine, and I'm afraid that the assets we have right across Europe without America is more than enough if we have the confidence and the will to support Ukraine and push Russia back. That means looking our adversary in the eye and not being spooked by that rhetoric. Being concerned about the escalatory ladder, absolutely. But the idea that we couldn't go it alone is simply wrong. And if you go down that road and join America, that is appeasement. The deal that was put on the table, that 28-point plan that actually handed concessions over to Russia, that saw Ukraine being forced to limit its military by half, to hand over one-fifth of its country, only giving the space for Russia to rearm and regroup. That is what happened in 1938. So I hear what you say. It's not palatable for us to distance ourselves from America, but if America is taking us in the wrong direction, we need to stand up ourselves. I'm afraid, as we began this conversation, the head of MI6 and the head of our armed forces are saying that Russia is now a direct threat to the United Kingdom. When are we going to wake up for that? We cannot be held back by appeasing Donald Trump, hoping he may or may not get a deal.
Tobias, thank you. That's Tobias Elwood there, who is the former chairman of the Defence Select Committee. He's also a former Defence Minister himself. I want to talk to Leslie, who's given me a ring from Glasgow, about all of this. 03444991000 is the number Leslie has called. You're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of what Tobias has said there, Leslie?
Well, Tobias never ceases to confound and amaze me. I've heard him so many times say similar things. And yeah, again, he doesn't present any evidence for what he says. Neither does our Prime Minister, neither does the head of MI6.
I think Tobias Elwood did give a number of examples of the way that he feels that Russia is attacking us already.
Yeah, I'll address all of them. So number one, in our atomic age, if you believe that Russian forces would reach across from Dover, and they would cross the English Channel and land troops in the UK, if you believe that, you've your head somewhere, because that would never happen in our atomic age. It would escalate to a nuclear war. The Pentagon thinks so. The former President Joseph Biden thought so, and the current President Donald Trump believes that too. And I'll concede these points that Russians are carrying out cyber attacks against the UK. Yes. However, we are providing Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine that are being fired into Russia and are killing Russians. Now, when you do that, there's going to be reciprocal action. The Russians are going to do stuff to back.
So what do we do then if Russia is a threat? What should we do? Do you agree with the Air Chief Marshal there that we need to build up our troops, and should we disengage from American support?
But what I think we should do is recognise what our former Prime Minister said. Our former Prime Minister Boris Johnson said we are in a proxy war against Russia, so we are currently carrying out operations against Russia. We just don't hear about that. We are just told that Russia's this looming threat because they're bad guys. No, we are actively doing operations against the Russian state and killing, are participating in killing Russian soldiers. Right. Secondly, I think what we should do is do what Donald Trump is doing. It makes more sense for our national security to trade and open up diplomatic channels with Russia, because let's face it, it's much better to trade and have diplomatic channels with a nuclear superpower than to get...
Yet we trade and have discussions with a nuclear superpower that is China, for example, and they're engaged in all sorts of espionage and cyber attacks against us as well. One doesn't necessarily cancel out the other, does it, Leslie?
We don't need to be allies and best friends with Russia, but what we should recognise is that what is taking place in Ukraine isn't this binary between one group that's good, one group is bad. The UN considers Ukraine a far more corrupt country. It's higher up the corruption index than Russia. You've had half of the Ukrainian government, including its chief of staff, Yermak, the justice minister, the energy minister, resign of corruption. So let's recognise that neither Ukraine or Russia are ideal governments to do business with.
Listen, I think there's a lot in that, Leslie, and I also think that I believe that Putin is an evil, nasty, warmongering dictator who is not a nice guy. What I don't believe on the counter side of that is that Vladimir Zelensky is this, perfect figure who we can't criticise and have a reasonable discussion about, which I think we've just had there. Leslie, thank you for your comments. Very, very interesting to hear them, especially in light of talking to Tobias Elwood there a second ago. Becca says we are not at war with Russia. We are supporting a non-NATO country. Tobias is a warmonger, and I'm not allowing my children to fight this this proxy war. Another person says you can hardly say Trump is on the side of the Russians. His country has supplied millions of dollars of weapons to kill Russians. Stupid comment. Also, he's got to try a new approach, otherwise nothing changes. Ernie says, ask Tobias, how are the Russians going to put boots on the ground in Britain? They would have to go through European airspace and waterways or over land to get to us. Do you think the EU would let that happen? Well, Ernie, I mean, he talked about the many other ways that he believes Russia is targeting us, and factually they are. Cyber and poisonings and other ways that are, you know, factual points there. Mike in Manchester says, Tobias Elwood, one of the warmongers that has made the world a more dangerous place in Mike's opinion. I'm sure Tobias would deny that. He's a disgraced and awful, disgusting human being who wants World War III. I just don't think Tobias Elwood wants World War III. Mike in Lincoln says, I have to admit that against my better judgment as a fellow veteran, I agree with Tobias Elwood about Trump. He gives every impression of being in the Kremlin's pocket. That in mind, I'd love to take a look at the FSB's dossier on him. Well, it's a very interesting book, actually. I interviewed the author about Trump's links to Putin going back many, many, many years, certainly when Trump was in real estate in New York as well. It's a really interesting book, and I think I haven't read all of it, but I've certainly read bits of it and I've interviewed the author as well. Chris says, what a load of rubbish from Mr. Elwood, fearmonger. I've never trusted him, not mentioning about the Muslim invasion. Ignore his rhetoric. He is just anti-Trump. And Dan in Kent says, evening Peter, evening Dan. Putin is not going on a land war with his 150 million population against Europe's 750 million population, and the Kremlin won't let him go nuclear unless Putin has support from China's 1.5 billion. Tobias, I'm afraid, is totally deluded. And Gareth says all these people talking about wars will never be the people who actually fight in any war. If Russia physically attacked them, then the gloves are off. Well, in fairness to Tobias Elwood, he has served this country and he was in the army and indeed has done many brave things. So I think we need to certainly remember that context. I'm going to talk about the junior doctors in a second. They're ignoring calls to scrap a 5-day strike starting tomorrow as the outbreak ravages the NHS in regard to flu. And we'll take a look at how much they earn and how much we think they should earn. Matthew Hulbert will be with us. He is a patient leader with Just Treatment, a campaigning organisation. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch on Twitter. Adam Ford Coughlin says, why didn't you challenge Leslie when he claimed Ukraine is more corrupt than Russia? That's absurd. Most Russians are poor, as Putin and his oligarchs have bled the country dry and become billionaires from their corruption. This always goes unchallenged. Well, listen, both Russia and Ukraine are very, very corrupt countries, Adam, so I take your point. It's absolutely fine. Rafi says, Britain stands almost friendless, not by accident, but by design. Its leaders manufacture enemies with every gesture, every policy, every smug illusion of superiority. And James Cox says Elwood is forgetting that he and his party are the ones that cut our military to the bone. Instead of spending money on defence, the Tories wasted billions on foreign aid, welfare and net zero. Their DEI policies and allowing woke to capture our institutions destroyed recruitment. And that is actually something that Trevor has pointed out on WhatsApp messages as well. Good afternoon, Peter. Good afternoon, Trevor. What white working class male would possibly sign up to our armed forces, especially as what we've seen, how our veterans have been persecuted, who are now in their 80s, some living on our streets. I would fight for this country, but not for this mob who prioritise illegal immigrants over their own citizens. Thank you for that, Trevor. Lots more to come on the point that Tobias Elwood made, but I want to talk now about junior doctors. Their strike starts tomorrow. I must say they've received quite a pay rise earlier in the year from Wes Streeting. They now want another one, and Amy puts it very well on Twitter when she says, on the junior doctors, they got a pay rise when Labour came into office last year with no productivity conditions attached, and now they want another 20-odd%. How is that fair when the nurses have had less? Well, one person who supports the doctors is Matthew Hulbert, who's a patient leader with Just Treatment and a political commentator. Matthew, tell me why you support the doctors. Good evening.
Good evening, Peter, and of course to your viewers and listeners as well. Well, I mean, what I'd say is that the doctors are just after pay restoration. And yes, it was partly restored last year, but not fully. They're not asking for extra. They are just asking for restoration. And
it's not restoration, though, is it,
yeah,
Matthew?
It is restoration.
Well, it isn't, because they're talking...
2008, it is.
Yeah, well, how many doctors have joined the NHS in the last 17 years? You're restoring something to a time before many doctors actually arrived and started working for the NHS, so you're not actually restoring anything, are you?
Well, there'll be those that have been around since then, and are we really
and many who haven't and have joined in the last 17 years and knew exactly what the pay scales were.
But Peter, are we really saying that doctors, and we shouldn't think of them, you know, I'm glad they've changed their name to resident because there's nothing junior about them. These are fully qualified, very clever individuals who do a very serious job that has people's lives in their hands.
And they're walking out on those people tomorrow morning, Matthew. They're walking out on them. They're getting into a guaranteed situation where people will die because they are not happy with a 29% pay rise. Many people find that absolutely abhorrent.
Well, I'm sure many do, but what I'd say to them as a patient, so it's not right that all patients are opposed to them because, you know, I am a patient and I support the striking doctors. What I'd say is, are they really not worth £22.50 an hour?
But it's more than that, isn't it?
What they're asking for. No,
it's more than that.
It's £22.50 an hour.
As a resident doctor, you'll earn, this is from the NHS website, you will earn a basic salary plus pay for any hours over 40 hours a week, a 37% enhancement for working nights, a weekend allowance for any work at the weekend, an availability allowance if you're prepared to be available on call, and other potential pay premiums. In foundation training, you will earn a basic salary of £38,000 to £44,000 from the 1st of April 2025. If you're a doctor starting your specialist training in 2025, your basic salary will be between £52,000 and £73,000. If you're working as a specialty doctor, you'll earn a basic salary of £61,000 to £99,000. And if you're a specialist grade doctor, still a junior doctor, you will earn a basic salary of between £100,000 and £111,000. So with the salary you're talking about £22 an hour, that is at the lower end of that. You're not talking about the many people who will already, for long periods of time, have been earning far more than that and far more than the national average.
Indeed. But those at the bottom end of the scale won't, and what they're asking for is pay restoration up to £22.50 an hour.
Well, and it's not restoration as we have established,
it is
but it isn't, because those people have just started, and if they have just started and they're getting £22 an hour,
and what they would have been on is £22.50 an hour. So
but they weren't working in 2008. Therefore, factually, it is not pay restoration. You cannot have your pay restored to something that you have never received, because that was 17 years ago.
The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, should stop using preschool language in calling these people moaning minis, and he should do a serious job of work and get back around the negotiating table.
He's negotiated with them previously. He's negotiated with them on a number of occasions, and in fact they got a 29% pay rise. I would be very interested to hear from any viewer and listener who has received a 29% pay rise in the public sector in the last year, because I believe they're probably one of the very few groups that has had a pay rise of anything like that. We've had some of the train drivers, not all of them, but some of the train drivers, for example, who've had huge pay rises. This is what Labour have done. They've given the junior doctors a large pay rise. They're still not happy with that, and that many people feel, and I feel, is unfair.
Well, many people may well feel like that, but I feel, again, as a patient that supports them, that they deserve pay restoration up to £22.50
it's not pay restoration as we've established.
an hour.
It's not pay restoration as we've established. Matthew, I wonder what your thoughts are on the fact that junior doctors will be given, have been already given. Well, junior doctors have already been given a pay rise of 29% with no changes to how they work. We've got a health service which has £200 billion a year spent on it, yet they can't cope with a few people getting the flu.
Do you want to know a harsh reality is that not enough is spent on our health service. We are still not up to the European average on spending.
Where does the money come from?
Health services.
So where does the money come from?
Our view at Just Treatment, and I know that you won't like this, Peter, but our view at Just Treatment is that those with the broadest shoulders should pay a wee bit more, and that is the very, very richest. And you know what? They should want to pay a wee bit more to ensure that there are better public services. And many do. The patriotic millionaires do. Others should as well.
Okay, so we have 33 billionaires in this country. They can live anywhere they like, as can very many millionaires. And we're in a situation where we have the highest taxation as a proportion of GDP since the Second World War. That is more than under the Conservatives, has gone up under Labour. So the fact is that those with the broadest shoulders are paying more. They are paying more, and they're paying far more than they have been previously.
Good. And they should want to pay a wee bit more to ensure that everyone has good access to properly funded, properly staffed public services. So, I mean, you know, I hope that West Streeting gets back around the negotiating table.
Well, he has been around the negotiating table on many, many occasions, and the ideological BMA have decided they're doing this. I wonder, Matthew, what you think is a reasonable level of taxation to pay for the NHS?
Well, as I say, you know, there are millionaires who say taxes more, and they want to be taxed more.
They can go to HMRC and put a check in.
I'm sure many do.
Well, they don't actually, and far fewer have done that this year than did last year, and the statistics back that up. I just wonder, from your perspective, what level of taxation you think is reasonable, and whether we actually need to start talking about efficiencies within the NHS.
I'm not an economist, but what I would say, as someone who, and you know, this isn't today about my personal experience, but as you well know, Peter, you know, I lost someone, some might argue, as a result of failings in the NHS, very dear to me. So I know that the NHS isn't perfect, but I think we should support those who work day in, day out, very long shifts, with people's lives in their hands. I think we should give them
and get paid £111,000 a year in some cases. Tell me your thoughts. I mean, surely the last time when West Streeting was around the table and did do a deal with the junior doctors, surely productivity changes and changes to working practices should have been part of that negotiation, because the doctors, I have sympathy with them when they talk about the bottlenecks when it comes to specialty roles and moving up the chain. I get that, but you're talking about someone being paid £22 or £22.50 an hour. That would be a good salary for many people, but they have a really, really good chance of earning far more money over the course of their career. And yes, they've trained hard for it and all the rest of it. But surely the point of the negotiations that happen should be changes to how, and efficiencies in terms of how junior doctors work.
Well, Peter, you're a bit blasé in saying, oh, well, they've trained for this, so I get, yeah, they have, and they work very hard, and they have life and death in their hands decisions every single day to make. I don't envy them their job, and I think we should respect the job that they do and
well, we
pay
do
them
respect
better.
the job they do. We pay them a decent wage. You can get paid between £38,000 as a starter, nearly £39,000 as a starter, which on day one you're paid more than the average wage in the UK, and that can go up to £111,000, £441. I think that's a good salary for the job they do.
And you know, you say that they can earn more than the average salary. Yeah, I think most people would accept that, given that the job they do. You seem to have some issue with the job that they do, Peter. This is a really important job that has people's lives in their hands. It's certainly not a job
doctors,
that I want to
and some junior doctors will be brilliant. There'll be people
resident doctors.
I was treated by a junior doctor a few months ago who was absolutely fantastic. He was great. He was really good. And there will be junior doctors who are lazy as sin, who are there punching in,
like in any job.
Right thing. Yeah, exactly. Well, my point is that the problem, I would argue, over the past few years is that we have looked at doctors and nurses and we've said they're all angels, they're all marvellous people, they're all wonderful. Well, no, they're not. Some of them are very, very good. Some of them deserve our praise, and some of them deserve our admiration, and some of them are useless. Well, I don't know that, because I don't know the vast majority of people who work in the NHS, and that's just simply a summation. The point is that there are many people who will not do the job particularly well, and the point is that if you have a negotiation with those people, you should be putting productivity changes and efficiency changes into it, because if we have an NHS that we're putting £200 billion a year into and it's not efficient, well, that is a major, major issue, Matthew. And it seems to me that your solution to that is to throw more money at the problem. We've done that time and time and time again in every fiscal event, every budget, and the NHS is not getting better.
You know what image has come into my mind, Peter? When people during the pandemic went outside of their houses to clap the doctors and nurses. And I said at the time, and I still say now, they don't need our claps. What they need is fair pay and to have the NHS stop being part privatised. I still say that now.
Don't you
Never
think
mind
that
the clapping. Let's pay them
£111,000 a year
properly.
is... Well, do you think...
Let's pay them properly.
Well, do you not believe that £111,000 a year is a fair wage?
Well, how many are on that?
Well, I don't know, but certainly if you get to the highest scale of the salary, but even on the lowest scale, you're on, when we've paid £500,000 for you to be trained, you're still on more than the average wage on £39,000 a year, and you have an incredibly straightforward and very clear way in which you can earn more money as your career goes on.
You see, I just can't understand what the problem is that apparently there is, or apparently you have, Peter, with them being paid more than the average wage, given the job
I have no
that they
problem with
do.
them being paid more than the average wage. What I have a problem with is them being paid even more when they've received a 29% pay rise previously. I don't know why that wasn't linked to efficiencies, and I don't know still, 15 minutes on from the start of this conversation, why you believe they should be paid more. I think they're paid fairly. I think that is absolutely clear. They've got a pay rise far more than most people in the public sector, and yet you're arguing for yet more money for an NHS that you're also arguing overall is underfunded. So to me, that doesn't stack up.
Well, I'll just say this. I think if there are, and this would obviously be an absolute tragedy, but I think if lives are lost as a result of this strike action,
there will be.
Then that, well, which would be an absolute tragedy, but I think that lies at the door of this Secretary of State and this government for not properly negotiating.
Totally disagree. It lies at the door of the junior doctors who've got a huge pay rise, and they will walk out. They say they care about patients. Patients will die as a result of what they do. Matthew, thank you. Matthew Hulbert is a patient leader with Just Treatment and a political commentator. What do you think of what he said there? 0344 499 1000. We'll take a look at the sport next with Sean Custis from The Sun. Stay with us here on Talk.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch, not least about my discussion there with Matthew Hulbert. Nick Flatt says, I fully support the junior doctors' industrial action, and I speak as a retired NHS consultant. My generation were massively exploited in the 80s and 90s, paid less than the cleaners per hour. If only we had more militant unions, perhaps this problem would not have been there. Another person says the lowest paid resident doctors must have their hourly rate raised to a minimum of £25 an hour. And Dave says, I suppose these doctors will be going on strike each year for pay restoration because the inflation rate will always be calculated on CPI rather than RPI. And just on the discussion we were having a little bit earlier on in regard to the military and fighting for your country, this person says on Twitter, Peter, who would fight for this country when its own government has absolute hatred of its own union flag and rips them down, yet allows flags of foreign terrorists to fly over the town halls and other public institutions? Well, the problem is even worse than that, because they recognise, as they should not, a Palestinian state. So it's not, in their view, a terrorist flag. It's the flag of a legitimate state. Right then, let's take a bit of a breather and talk about the sport.
Sports news from The Sun.
Sean Custis is here from The Sun, the head of sport there. Hi, Sean.
Hi, how you doing, Pierre?
I'm okay, thank you. There was a thrilling Premier League game last night at Old Trafford.
There was.
Tell us what happened.
One of the games of the season it was. Maybe one of the best Premier League games of all time last night.
Really?
Man United 4, Bournemouth 4. That's pretty tasty. And Man United led 3 times and still couldn't get the job done. Couldn't see it over the line. 4-4 draw, very exciting, but adds to Man United's continued inconsistency. There was a chance to move and challenge European places, which they've failed to take again, and it gets very frustrating for the fans. But as a side issue to that, and a very big side issue today, an interview came out with the captain, Bruno Fernandes.
He's not too happy.
He's not happy, and he says he was very hurt as he got the feeling that United wanted to sell him in the summer to Al Hilal of the Saudis. Now, the Saudis have long been interested in getting Bruno Fernandes. There was a £100 million offer on the table. Obviously, the wages would have been very good. It's very attractive financially. But he decided he wanted to stay because the manager wanted him to stay. But he says he got the feeling that the board would happily have let him go.
Right.
And he was hurt and saddened by that, and he didn't like it. And he felt he should have had a bit more backing from them. So that's caused a bit of a rift in camp, another rift in camp, which the manager didn't really need when he's trying to get everything going in the right direction to improve their league form. And it's something that people didn't really see coming, I've got to say. We thought that had all been put to bed, the discussions about Al Hilal. We knew that the board had suggested, look, if you want to go, then we'll understand. But not quite as Fernandes has put it, that he felt they would happily have seen him go out the door. Not good news for Man United.
So what do you think happens now?
I think he probably sees it out till the end of the season, and then we have another look at it probably and see where everybody stands there. Possibly depends on where Man United finish in the league, whether they've got top class European football. I mean, it's a long shot to say Champions League, but they might get Champions League football, and maybe that would persuade him to stay. But he might start to think, you know what, I'm better off out of it.
Let's talk about another competition, the Carabao Cup action tonight.
Carabao Cup tonight, Cardiff versus Chelsea. Now, you would expect Cardiff in League One to lose to Chelsea, who are obviously a top Premier League side, and I can't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case. But there's been unrest at Chelsea as well, with Enzo Maresca suggesting he's not getting the support he feels he should. He said last week he'd had the worst 48 hours at Chelsea that he'd had since he joined the club, but he didn't really specify who it was who was giving him that worst 48 hours, but he did say it wasn't the fans, and he didn't actually have a go at the media. So we presume it's either the sporting directors or the board themselves, who I think he feels on putting an arm around him enough and saying you're doing a great job. You're not very happy about that. I'm not sure winning a League Cup would be enough to assuage him of the opinion that they're not supporting, but it would certainly be a little bit in his armoury to be saying, look what I'm doing for you. I'm winning you silverware. When Mourinho first won a Carabao Cup or a League Cup as it was then, it was seen as the launching pad for them. Yeah. Although this time, of course, Maresca's already won the Club World Cup, for instance, which is, you know, in theory, you can't get bigger than that.
Well, indeed. It's a not insignificant competition, yeah.
Better supported. Yeah. Maybe he's got a point, but he hasn't really specified what the problem is.
Tell us about Kylian Mbappe, Paris Saint-Germain, and the small issue of €60 million.
Well, it's been painted in strange ways, this. So, basically, Mbappe was suing PSG for unpaid wages and something to do with bonuses and stuff like that. It's sort of being portrayed as this was 3 months' wages, which he was owed. It's a little bit more than that. It is bonuses, signing on bonus, and what they call an ethics bonus. He's now at Real Madrid. He got a free transfer to Real Madrid. PSG were really furious about the fact he went free to Real Madrid because they wanted to sell him to the Saudis for 300 million. So they countersued him for that money, but they didn't really have a leg to stand on there. He chose just not to go and see out his contract. He did, however, sue them for £231.5 million, which the judge said, well, you're not getting that.
Yeah.
But you are getting 52.5 million, which is €62 million, which is nice, isn't it? I mean,
well,
it's not bad.
It'll come up to Christmas, you know.
Coming up to Christmas,
pay for a few. What's an ethics bonus?
I don't know what an ethics bonus they are. Really, I was looking it up earlier on, but I'm not sure.
Is this maybe not getting yellow or red cards or something, or sort of? I don't know. Can you find out for the next time? Actually, yeah, I definitely want to know what an ethics bonus is.
But Paris Saint-Germain, it's fair to say, are still a bit miffed about the fact they've had to pay this money and may yet appeal.
Okay, well, we'll find out if they do. Thank you very much indeed. That's Sean Custis there, who's the head of sport at The Sun. Plenty more to discuss, and thank you to everybody who has been in touch about the health issues and, of course, the junior doctors' strike. Sam says, what about paramedics? Far less money and also have people's lives in their hands. There just isn't enough money for everyone to have a good pay rise. Junior doctors should stop being selfish and let other people get the pay rise they need. We find out what an ethics bonus is, as seen by Kylian Mbappe, refers to a specific clause in a player's contract where payments like loyalty or signing bonuses are contingent on upholding certain ethical conduct or club responsibilities, acting as a financial incentive for good behaviour or a penalty for bad behaviour. I've learned a lot today, as I always do from you, Sean. Sean Custis, the head of sport. Lots more to discuss in the next hour. We will talk in just a second to Akil Ahmed, who's former head of religion and ethics at the BBC, talking about ethics. The only way is ethics. Stay with us here on Talk. Loads to discuss on what your views to. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 6 o'clock on Tuesday evening. There's an awful lot to talk about, including the doctors' strikes. Lots of people getting in touch about that in the interview I did a little bit earlier on there with Matthew Hulbert, who is a campaigner who believes the doctors are entitled to the increased salary that they want. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. Donald Trump as well, suing the BBC for $10 billion. We'll talk to their former head of religion and ethics as well and ask him about adverts and subscriptions on the BBC that could subsidise a licence fee and what he thinks about all of that. UK activists chanting "Long live the Intifada" hours after the Bondi attack. Absolutely shameful behaviour in Oxford there. We'll talk about that with Nicole Lambert and ask why the Community Secretary was not at the major Hanukkah and indeed vigil for those in Bondi that happened in just outside Parliament last night. Nicole Lambert will be here to talk about that. We'll take all of your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes as well. I know there are people who want to talk about Russia, about the doctors, about students, about Tobias Elwood as well and what he had said previously. There's got some voice notes as well I'll play in a second. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. I want to get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a WhatsApp text message, send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. That's the number to get through to have a chat with me between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, the junior doctor strike is happening tomorrow morning. In 13 hours from now, they will be on strike. I had quite a clash, I think, with Matthew Hulbert there a little bit earlier on. Lots of people in touch about that. Let's hear a couple of voice notes. One from Mick.
Yes, doctors and nurses do a good nurses do a good job. Doctors, I've been in hospital a few times and the doctor was about as much use as a wet paper bag. The nurse was a lot more knowledgeable, a lot more helpful. No, they don't deserve a big pay rise. What they should do is, if they want more money, go to another country. Go to a privatised health service where you can earn whatever you want. We're paying for this.
Well, thank you for that, Mick. Quite a number of people getting in touch on Matthew's attitude and what his views are. Someone says, as someone who worked for the NHS for 50 years, it's just greed now. It's egged on by a Marxist union. Peter, you forgot that the NHS have gold-plated pensions, unlike the private sector, who pay their wages and pensions. And Dean from Paynton saying that he liked the interview. Thank you for that. Hughie says, as one who has been in hospital several times this year, I'm always aware of the amazing unsung job that cleaners do every day. If they went on strike for one day, the hospitals would collapse completely. Yeah, they're probably amongst the lowest paid workers in hospitals. I always talk to them and thank them, as most seem to ignore them as they go about their work. Well, if you're in an office, if you're in a workplace, I would say to you that you should talk to everybody and you should have this exactly the same way that you treat people, whether it is a cleaner or whether it's the chief executive of the organisation. I'm not saying I'm Mother Teresa, but I do try to have that attitude, certainly. Lee has a voice note on doctor strikes as well.
The next time you get somebody on banging on about how doctors should be paid more, please bring into the pension that they get as well, because nobody seems to talk about this pension that's protected. Private sector don't get that. I don't get that. So why should they, on top of massive pay rises, also be given a huge pension? Give them the pay rise, take the pension away. See what their stance would be.
Lee, thank you for your message there. I want to talk about Donald Trump now, because he's suing the BBC for £10 billion over the splicing, the doctoring of a clip that changed what he was saying. There's also a thought from the Culture Secretary that adverts and subscriptions on the BBC could actually subsidise the licence fee. Let's hear from the President what he said. This was yesterday, and since he has been speaking, the lawsuit has gone in Florida. This is what Donald Trump has been saying.
In a little while you'll be seeing I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth, literally. They put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something. So we'll be bringing that lawsuit. A lot of people are asking, when are you bringing that lawsuit? Even the media can't believe that one. They actually put terrible words in my mouth having to do with January 6th that I didn't say. And the beautiful words that I said, right? The beautiful words, talking about patriotism and all of the good things that I said, they didn't say that, but they put terrible words. They actually have me speaking with words that I never said, and they got caught because I believe somebody at BBC said, this is so bad, it has to be reported. That's called fake news. So we'll be filing that suit probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Well, since Donald Trump has spoken, that lawsuit has been put in, 2 cases actually, and he's asking for $10 billion in compensation. Now, he's done this before with a number of different American outlets, CNN, for example, CBS, and he attempted to sue CBS for $10 billion and got 16 million, so less than, well, sort of 0.16% of what he had originally asked for. So presumably they will settle in some way. I wonder what you think should happen. Give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Let's speak to Akhil Ahmed, who is former head of religion and ethics at the BBC and a very valued contributor here, even though I generally disagree with him. Akhil, I wonder what you make of this. What should the BBC do now? It's lost its Director General, it's lost its head of news. They have apologised to Donald Trump. How should they approach this?
Well, I think ultimately we've got to remember this is a lawsuit that's happening in America. Donald Trump has a track record, as you said, of asking for billions from everybody. Not every single broadcaster in America gave in last time that he went down this route. So some have and some haven't. I think there's a difference between an apology for a mistake that was made, and then you start to get into a whole different conversation about context, etc., and all of those kind of things about did you change the whole overall ethos of this. I think what the BBC are going to have to do is defend this. There's no getting around it. How it will be, how they can be impacted in terms of can a foreign court decides to find them, do they have to pay that? I'm not particularly sure.
It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how. It'll be interesting to see how it all works. Certainly,
exactly.
the BBC has corporate entities in America as well, and who's actually.
They might just have to close them down, Peter. Yeah.
I mean, $10 billion. I don't think he's going to get as much as that, although I'm not a legal expert. We'll see what happens. I mean, the whole budget.
I think the big difference, Peter. Sorry to step in.
Go ahead.
Between other things and this one is that. Often this is, I mean, look, we all know what Donald Trump's like as a businessman and everything. There's a bit of a shakedown element of this. You know, you go in and you go in big and you come to a deal. Now, that works if you're talking about American broadcasters, because the American system of regulation is very different to here. It's much more politicized in the sense that, you know, it's a political appointee, etc. And we do know that the person that is running the equivalent of Ofcom in America has made some real politicized moves against other American organizations. So we do know that's what's going on. The difference with a non-American organization is they're not as bothered about that respect, about about the shakedown in the sense of whether or not this will impact on their ability to get a franchise in America. And that's what's gone on in the past. Some of those things we talked about earlier on were because those people were negotiating mergers between different companies. And so to pay it meant that they would get their deal to go through. It's a very different situation for the BBC, because the big impact it may have is that if, for instance, they're found they're guilty of this and the fee is so astronomical, it might just be cheaper to walk away from America. I don't know. We have to see how this builds up, but they will have the best legal brains, I imagine, on this. But ultimately, we have to remember there's an element of a shakedown. It's a very different, you know, legal and regulatory system to the UK. And whether or not a foreign organisation, like i.e. the BBC in this case, feels that they would need to pay that kind of money, they would have to make a decision on as to whether or not having a presence in America as a broadcaster is worth their while going forward. If they were hit with a ridiculous kind of, you know, tax, a ridiculous kind of fine for what effectively has been a mistake. that they've apologised.
It's not a mistake. It was a doctoring. A mistake.
No, which they've apologised
yeah,
for.
okay, they've apologised for it, but it's not. You can't really call it a mistake. It was a doctoring of footage.
Okay, the word was wrong, but what I mean is what they did, the wrong thing they did, they've apologised for.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
What do you make of what Lisa Nandy's talking about, adverts and subscriptions in the BBC to possibly subsidise the licence fee? What is your view on the licence fee? I mean, I am not, believe it or not, anti-BBC. I don't want to close them down. I don't want them to not be a part of British culture. I think in many ways they're a great organisation. In some ways they're a terrible organisation. But the point is that the licence fee is a complete anachronism in my view. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we have to have some kind of public service broadcasting, which is what this is supposed to pay for, right? Let's be honest with that. It's not actually paying for a channel as such. It's paying for the ability to get public live streaming of all broadcasting, even included talkTV. Yeah, that's also included in the ability to get that. Now, with regards to public service broadcasting, we have a system that has worked. Now, I don't think it works anymore. I don't think, and I think I'm not alone in saying that, whether advertising is the right way or subscription. I think there's a bigger question about what do we consider to be public service broadcasting? And there's such a thing as we've talked about, something which is called contestability, where you would effectively, broadcasters themselves would say, look, we want to make public service broadcasting, but we can't afford it because we can't get advertising for it. And that's the problem, that Lisa would know this. And I would hope her and her advisors would be telling her, look, the advertising you get for Strictly, you're not going to get for an arts documentary or a current affairs documentary. Yeah. So advertising, I know this from my time as an executive at Channel 4. You know, my programming was kind of not my programming like religion and arts and news, etc. It was all subsidized in those days by Brand Designs and Big Brother and all those programs. And we were very clear about that. Now, the thing about the BBC is this would be a huge shift in how what we accept. You would have to have more primetime output to bring in the advertising to subsidize the stuff that doesn't work. So what I would say is we have to look at whether or not we have a license fee or not. I don't think that works, but there should be some kind of levy, and that can be done for against business in some form or other, a levy which provides for public service broadcasting, which all broadcasters could tip into.
And certainly that's the
argument.
Okay.
If I'm ITV and I want to do religion and arts, I go to this levy, I pitch for it, a commissioner says, yes, we like that, you get the money, and it subsidised my programming. Certainly
what happens, or a version of what happens in Germany, I understand as well.
Exactly.
Akil, thank you. Akil Ahmed there, former head of religion and ethics at the BBC. I want to speak to Tim in Hartlepool, who's given me a ring about doctor strikes, 0344 499 1000. Tim, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi. Yeah, it was a conversation you were having earlier, Peter, where it was to do with the doctors.
Yep.
So a couple of points, really. I remember during COVID, and I'm only giving this example just to kind of create a sense of how powerful the BMA is, in the sense that during COVID, the contract stated that if you were to succumb to COVID, that you would have to obviously leave the hospital and go home and stay there until you had 2 clear COVID tests.
Yeah.
But straight after that sentence, actually in the contract, were the words, unless you don't feel well enough, which gave every single person who, quite rightly, living through hell as it's been described to us during COVID, they were then given an absolute fail-safe get-out by just saying that although they had 2 negative tests, they didn't feel well enough. And at one point, the research I did showed that there was up to 10,000 NHS staff claiming that they weren't well enough to return, despite the fact they had clear tests. So the first reason I say
those tests weren't fail-safe, though, were they, Tim?
I'm just telling you what it says in the contract. The contract.
Sure,
says,
of course, but the tests themselves weren't fail-safe.
I'm just saying that the 2 tests, once they had the 2 tests that were both negative, they were then told to come back to work, which led to, again, as I say, up to 10,000. Oh, in fact, it was considered to be 10,000 NH staff that were not attending work. But the crazy thing about that, Peter, is that was allowed to continue for 2.5 years. So you then had this moment where you said you didn't feel well enough, and the consequence, 2.5 years later, you're still on full salary, and even
how many people are still on full salary 2.5 years after COVID, having not gone back to work? There can't be that many of them, are there?
Right now, I don't know because they've changed it now.
Okay. Well, Tim, listen, thanks for that. Sorry, just final point. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, the final point was, so that was the fact, and I only mentioned that, Peter, to portray how powerful the medical...
The BMA is, yeah. And we'll see that tomorrow, certainly, in those strikes that start at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Michael's in Birmingham and has given me a ring about Trump and the BBC. Michael, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
I hope Trump wins. I hope he bankrupts it and dismantles it. I don't think he will, but I think this case isn't so much about... It's about challenging the BBC culture. I'm a white Brit.
Oh, Michael,
on the BBC.
We're just losing you, Michael. We'll see if we can maybe get you back. I think maybe you're driving. Maybe get you back on a better line maybe later in the programme. Mick says if we're going to war, we can't trust the BBC, and if Trump can rid us of them, he will be doing us a favour. How patronising Matthew Hulbert was, says this person. No one has ever said that doctors aren't important. However, lots of people who work in the private sector are important and can't get paid so much extra. The NHS needs running as a business and properly. Junior doctors know exactly what they sign up to before they train. I could go on, but I won't. Dan says, I drive an HGV and earn £26,000 a year, Matthew. Is my job important? Of course it is. Of course it is, Dan. And I think... yeah, I expect Matthew would say it was as well, but yeah, I do think there's a lot. There's a lot in that, Dan, and thank you very much for your message. Mike in Lincoln says, does Matthew think nurses, police, firefighters, military, who not only save lives but put their lives on the line, should be paid more than junior doctors? These people are greedy, and any deaths are on their hands, says Mike in Lincoln. I fundamentally agree with you, Mike, and I think that point that Matthew Hulbert made, his final point there, saying that any deaths will be in the hands of West Streeting. I totally disagree with that. I'm not particularly a Labour supporter. As you know, I've never voted for them. I probably never will. I think West Streeting has made a number of mistakes, but I don't think that he will have blood in his hands if people die. I think the junior doctors who could have saved those lives will, and I think that's a very straightforward point. You cannot defend the indefensible, says Jackie. Thank you for that, and some praise for the interview too. Becca says a hospital couldn't run without cleaners and porters. Let's compare wages. Very good points. We're going to talk in just a second about Oxford activists, overprivileged people at Oxford University who have been shouting, long live the Intifada, ours, after the Bondi attack. It is just absolutely shameful. Nicole Lambert will be with us in a second.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, after what has happened in Bondi, of course, there has been so much condemnation across the world of those terrorists who shot those innocent Jewish people. There are so many of them still recovering in hospital, so many have died, and Bondi is still recovering from the shock. Clear here in the UK, there was a major demonstration last night for Hanukkah and also in solidarity with those who had been murdered outside Parliament. Now, the Community Secretary, Steve Reid, wasn't there. He was at another Hanukkah event. Why he wasn't there, we'll get into with Nicole Lampert in a second. But just in the meantime, I want to speak to Ajmal Masroor, who's an imam, a broadcaster and author, a grassroots activist, a campaigner, formerly independent candidate for Bethnal Green and Stepney, the parliamentary constituency. Ajmal, thank you for joining me today. I just wonder what your thoughts are in regard to what happened in Bondi.
Hi, sorry, I think my phone just turned.
I think we've got you now. We've got you now. Go ahead.
Good. Well, thank you very much for inviting me, firstly. It's horrible. It's awful. It's something that words can't describe. Any innocent life lost in any part of the world, anybody killing anybody is unacceptable under any circumstances. So I stand firmly with you, with the world, in condemning the atrocious attack on those people who are celebrating, the Jewish communities who are celebrating a very special day for themselves. And the people who have carried out that heinous crime should be apprehended, tried for their crimes, and put behind bars and locked away for good.
I would have loved to have heard that from many other leaders of lots of faiths. We did get in touch with the Church of England yesterday. They gave us a statement eventually. There are many, many moderate Muslims out there, Muslims who get on with their lives and do what they want to do and make sure that they contribute to this country and live by our values, that often feel they can't speak out. You have, and you've done that right there now, and thank you for doing that. I just wonder why you think it is that so many ordinary Muslims don't feel they can say what you've just said.
Well, I've been receiving hundreds of messages from Muslims across the world on my Facebook post and my Twitter feed and my Friday sermons. Everyone is unequivocal in their condemnation of grotesque killing and taking of innocent lives in all parts of the world, whether it is Jewish life, Christian life, or Muslim life. You know, all lives matter. We're all humans after all. Taking one life is like taking the lives of the entire humanity. So I haven't come across any Muslims from my network of friends and families who have any hesitation in condemning it. Unfortunately, hatred has dominated our narrative. And I wrote a piece that hate is the biggest enemy against all communities coming together. There is a verse in the Quran which says, and don't allow hate to dominate. Don't allow hatred to swerve you from serving justice. So I think the paramount principle is we need to call for justice. We need to be consistent about calling for justice. We need to stand in solidarity of all victims of the world, and we need to condemn all killings, no matter who they are.
Okay, and you're right to do that. I wonder what you do and what the many moderate Muslims that you represent and talk to, and friends and family and people you're talking to on Facebook and so on, what can they do, what should they do to stop the scourge of Islamism, the radical version of your faith that informed the actions of those terrorists at Bondi Beach?
Well, if you don't mind, I just want to separate the words that you've used. Those words I don't recognize. Islamism doesn't ring any bell. I'm a Muslim, and that's it. End of discussion for me. I subscribe to Islam 100%. I believe in the words of God, the Quran, that teaches me how to be kind, generous, how to lead a life based on justice and fairness for all people. And Quran very clearly says all human beings are born with dignity and honor, and nobody has the right to indignify them. Every human being deserves access to justice, and we must do everything possible for justice.
And I get that.
Your description of some of those Muslims, I don't recognize.
Okay, but the point is that if you're carrying an ISIS flag, if you're doing what the horrendous events that you've unequivocally condemned in Australia, the point is that those people have used a version of Islam that they have interpreted in a way that you don't interpret it, of course. What can people like you do to stop those people doing that? Because there are imams who preach a radical version of Islam that you don't, but who would excuse some of the events, for example, in Australia.
Well, the first thing we should do is not give them any credence. By you giving references to them, by you putting them in a box, by you giving them a label, you're glorifying them. Let's not even mention them.
How is
They're
it glorifying? I mean, we've got to mention them because they're dealing with, they're inspiring people like those terrorists in Australia. You've got to talk about this. We can't just sweep it under the carpet.
Of course, I agree, but I'm saying don't use the word Islam to label them. I'll give you an example. If I lie, I'm doing an anti-Islamic work. If I cheat, I'm being anti-Islamic. If I murder somebody, I'm being anti-Islamic. Islam as a word, Islamic as a word, defines a positive trait. Using Islamic to define a negative trait is an oxymoron. Just like calling pig kosher, you won't do that. It's like calling pig halal.
But those people,
So my point is very simple. Anybody who abuses Islam, we need to call them abusers, criminals. You know, British flag, our good flag of our country, has been hijacked by far right, by thugs, by EDL marchers, by racists. We don't desecrate the flag because of them. We don't glorify their act. We condemn them as racist. We call them criminals and we lock them up. Do the same with anybody, whether they're Christian, Jewish, Muslim. If they break the law, if they take lives, if they bomb innocent people, if they shoot innocent people, lock them up. Use the law that we have to protect lives and honour lives.
And the law is very important in regard to this. But again, yes. I want to ask what those in the Muslim faith can do when there are those who go down the road of radical Islam, where they go down this road, where they use the Quran as an excuse, where they say they're inspired by ISIS, by Hamas, by Hezbollah, by terrorist organisations that use the Quran as the basis of what they do. That's not the Quran as you understand it, but it is the Quran as they understand it.
Do you know, I lived with 2 death threats, and I had to leave my home and hide for 5 years from the ISIS and from the Daesh group and from the Somali terrorists. My family had to leave the country in order to protect themselves from the potential for a death threat on my life.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
I've earned the right to say what I say, and I say it very clearly. I don't give them even a moment of publicity or oxygen. Do you know what I said to an ITV presenter who asked me the same question? I said, death is not decided by ISIS or Daesh. Death, for me, is decided by God. If the entire world was to come together wanting to harm me, they wouldn't harm me.
Why did they threaten you? What did they say that you had done?
I criticized them openly. I condemned them openly from the pulpit. I've written against them. I spoke up against them on television, on media. I said, these guys don't even understand the letter I of Islam. Never mind being a Muslim in the way they narrate or in the way they abuse and use. Quran is very clear, my friend. Quran says, if you want to be a good Muslim, you have to be good to God, you have to be good to yourself, and you have to be good to your fellow human beings. And being good to fellow human beings means you have to be peaceful, you have to be just, and you have to stand together in pursuit of justice for all people. That's what Islam says. If anybody violates that, I'm afraid they don't qualify to be called a Muslim. And I don't even understand why you or anybody else uses the word Islam before them, because it just gives them credence for no reason.
Okay, thank you for that, Ajmal Masroor there, Imam, broadcaster and author. Appreciate your joining us on the programme. Nicole Lampert is with us, the journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism. Nicole, I wonder what you made of that interview.
I mean, yeah, it's great that he condemns the acts. I think it's a little disingenuous to remove Islam from it, however much he might want to, and I, as a member of a minority myself, I completely understand. I wish I could say someone like Jeffrey Epstein wasn't Jewish, but he was. So, I think you can't divorce it, because it is inspired by the Quran. Whether it's the wrong inspiration or the right inspiration, you simply can't divorce it. And I think the first thing to recognize it is to basically say, this is a bad part of our community and we need to do our best to push it out, not to kind of brush it under the carpet and just say, well, he's not Muslim, so it's nothing to do with me.
Yeah. Speaking of bad parts of the community, UK activists, including at Oxford University, chanting "Long live the Intifada" hours after the Bondi attack. I mean, it would be unbelievable if it were not just so believable, given how outrageous and tasteless and wrong these people are.
I think, in some ways they do us a favour by their horrendous and revolting behaviour. We've just seen 15 people shot dead, Holocaust survivor, a 10-year-old girl, and they are celebrating it. So that is showing us, it's showing the world, it's showing anyone who's potentially neutral exactly what this movement is. It's about killing Jews, and it's about coming after the West next. We're just the first rung, and these are people who are completely and utterly heartless. And really, it's time for our government to do something, and actually do something about that phrase, because it's a call to murder. We know that now because they are showing us.
Well, I agree with you. It's incitement. Speaking of the government, we haven't managed to get an answer out of the Community Secretary, Steve Reid, about why he wasn't at the major demonstration outside Parliament yesterday to celebrate Hanukkah, but also to be in solidarity with those who were murdered and injured in the anti-Semitic terrorist attack in Sydney. What do you make of the government's reaction to this?
So the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, who hosted the event with Chabad, they put out a statement about half an hour ago to explain exactly what happened, which is that they'd reached out to 3 of the major parties all at the same time. Reform said yes straight away. The Tories, they found someone. They found Lord Wolfson, and the government promised Steve Reid. So that's who they were expecting. I was in the crowd yesterday. Gideon Falter, the head of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, was like, "Steve Reid, we understand you're here to talk. Can you come and make yourself clear?" That didn't happen, and we waited a few minutes, and then he basically said, "Doesn't appear to be here," and that's when the booing started, and people were furious. And then someone else, a very junior minister, did come on, and presumably, I don't know if she just happened to be there. We were obviously across the road from the House of Commons, and she came on. She was woefully unprepared and not really prepared for the booing and the sheer fury. Like I saw it after the Manchester killings, the anger of the crowd there, that I had never been in a crowd of my own community where people are shouting and screaming at a government minister, the absolute fury, because we are really sick of words, we are sick of platitudes, we are ready for some action. And to go back to the idea of globalise the Intifada, we have seen that now, and it's time for this to end, because we don't want to be any more. We don't want more police officers outside our schools and our synagogues. We have enough of that. In that we are already having to spend a lot of energy protecting ourselves, but we want the government to do something to help protect us.
And speaking of Labour, there is one very prominent Labour supporter, Dale Vince, who has written the following on Twitter, if we can just get it up on the screen. I think he appears to have deleted it now, actually. To be clear, Netanyahu blamed Australian government policy for the terror attack at Bondi Beach. I find that outrageous. Australians surely will too, wrote Dale Vince. I pointed out what I believe to be an obvious and logical thing. It is far more likely that Israeli policy, not Australian policy, is the cause. In due course, we may find out as one attacker is in custody. I very much doubt he will cite Australia's recognition of Palestine as his reason for attacking Jewish people. Netanyahu is trying to gaslight us all and tries to use this atrocity to support his arguments. I find that morally repugnant as well as illogical. If I've not yet been clear enough, I condemn all acts of terror and all forms of racism. Well, we know that Stephen Kinnock, who is a government minister for Labour, he's a health minister, he has called on Dale Vince to apologise for the comments. He spoke to our colleagues at Times Radio this morning.
Dale Vince should apologise for that. It is completely wrong to somehow imply that the Jewish people should be blamed collectively for the actions of the Israeli government, and he should apologise for that. I haven't taken any.
Should the Labour Party take money off him?
Well, let's see. First of all, let's ensure that Dale Vince does come forward and apologise for those remarks, and we will then review the position and take it from there.
I just don't think the Labour Party should take another penny off him. Nicole, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think this man he showed himself more than one time for exactly who he is. I'm not sure if you've seen any pictures of his building in Stroud, but there's an absolutely enormous Palestine flag, which is posted so that it looks like the triangle that is the Hamas sign. So this is who this man is. So stop taking his money. Like, you don't need his money. Stop being greedy. And this is again, just an apology is not good enough. He said what he thought. He's had 48 hours or so to apologise if he was going to. He's not going to. And this is just to me, it's like the same people that blame the West for 9/11 or blame British policy for 7/7. Blame the actual people who did it. Blame the terrorists.
Yeah, well, exactly, Nicole. Wise words as usual. I should say with Dale Vince, we have asked him on this programme and a number of other programmes today right across the output here on Talk. Nicole, for the meantime, thank you very much as always. Nicole Lambert, great journalist, great campaigner against anti-Semitism, of course, as well. We're going to take a look inside The Sun in just a minute. John Lucas, who's the night news editor, will tell us the top stories that they are covering. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including the person who says, if a doctor is neglectful of their duty of trying to save a life, then are they not struck off? Surely refusing to treat people, which is the same as saying by striking, is the same. Very interesting point there. It feels like we are worse off now than ever with the cost of so many things. So hearing the doctors grumbling now, having been given a huge rise, makes me so angry. They're completely delusional to the reality we're all facing. They're using life and death as a negotiating point, and it is disgraceful, says that texter. Well, if you want to get in before the top of the show, please feel free to do so. 03444991000. For the meantime, I want to talk to John Lucas, the night news editor at The Sun, about what's in the paper tomorrow. Perhaps big changes for the BBC, John?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you're talking about value for money and what, day-to-day life is costing us all.
Sure.
Don't forget, you've got to pay for the privilege in this country of having a TV because of, mostly because of the BBC.
Yeah.
And they're undergoing a consultation as part of their charter review 2027. And something they're talking about now, well, if you don't think that you get value for money from the Beeb at the moment, you will be disappointed to hear that some of your favourite shows, such as Happy Valley, Peaky Blinders, all sorts of stuff, could end up going behind a paywall.
Well, that's interesting. So even though you've paid the licence fee for these shows in the first place, would this be on the iPlayer, or how would it work?
Yeah, well, it will go behind some sort of paywall on the iPlayer. So I think what they're looking at is the world of streaming, and if you subscribe to these different services, you'll know you can get your ads free.
Yes.
You have different levels of subscriptions across all these other things, Netflix, Amazon, all the rest of it. So the Beeb are looking at this and saying, well, could this be the thing to save us? It's £174.50, I think, is the licence fee at the moment. So it's and they need to make about 700 million in savings to keep the BBC afloat. So I think they're thinking, well, is this a way to avoid putting it up as a flat rate? But if you actually want to watch anything that's half decent, it's going to be behind a paywall. And obviously, don't forget, the BBC don't have any sport anymore.
Yeah.
So they've got the news and they've got the light entertainment. So it feels like they might be trying to put the light entertainment behind this paywall.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens there, and certainly if Donald Trump takes a big chunk out of their money as well, what the result of all of that is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think something that's also going to disappoint people about this consultation is the idea that people who are receiving benefits actually will get a discount on the licence fee.
Really?
So
right.
if you're a working person, you're going out to work, and you're an honest person and you're going to pay the licence fee, you're going to end up paying more. Other people
goes back to what I often say on this programme: where is the reward for doing the right thing? There isn't one. And it's interesting, another story you're covering tomorrow is about Benefits Britain. More than 200,000 new claims for disabilities lodged over 3 months, equivalent to the size of Milton Keynes.
Yeah, well, it segs into this. Yeah, so exactly. It's a huge figure. So this is we're now up to 3.9 million people, so nearly 4 million people who are entitled to PIP. So this is a 1% increase on the numbers just from July, and it's quite incredible number now. And there must be something not quite right here. A lot of it is to do with mental health claims. So the latest figures say 39% of these claims are for mental health issues, and it's stuff like anxiety, and these sorts of conditions can be very, very difficult for people to deal with and get into work.
Well, it can also be overdiagnosed, and even the health secretary himself believes they're overdiagnosed.
Exactly, and we're also, our living standards that we have now in this country are fantastic. We're not a country mired in poverty. We have brilliant rules and regulations on working conditions, working hours. Most companies are very and bosses are very sort of geared towards work-life balance. A lot's been learnt from COVID. There's tons of flexible working, even in sort of very tough jobs where people would always previously be coming into the office. So why on earth this PIP situation seems to have got completely out of control?
It'll be very interesting to see your coverage on that tomorrow in The Sun.
Yeah, well, the good thing, what we've got sort of behind in the locker on this story is we've got a great chat with, I can't say who it is, but someone who's a very high-profile benefits claimant before, who was in the news years and years and years ago, and she's got a lot of interesting stuff to say about the benefit system and how it's rigged, sort of against people who, or sort of, it's keeping people on this cycle of benefits, and she's broken free from it and is living a fantastic life as a very successful businesswoman. That will be
Definitely worth reading in the paper tomorrow. Tell us about the latest that you're getting from Bondi Beach and the hero who paid with his life as he tried to wrestle the gun off one of the attackers. There's so many stories coming out still about this horrendous anti-Semitic attack.
That's right. So there's still details coming out about it. So the big sort of human side of this today was about Boris Gurman. He's a 69-year-old chap. He's a Russian, but he's lived in Australia for decades. And this was right at the start of the attack, we think. Sajid Akram, he's the father, this father and son terrorist duo. He'd just draped a homemade ISIS flag over the bonnet of his car, and he'd taken his rifle out. There's video of Boris tackling him and actually managing to take a gun from him. Unfortunately, this guy, Sajid Akram, had 6 weapons which he used in this, and he was able to walk away and pick up another weapon, and he shot Boris dead and Boris's wife, Sophia, also, she's 61 years old, killed them both. And it's just, horrific. This was all caught on dash cam. Yes. And it's just that there have been lots of tales of heroism from this attack, and the death toll, I'm sure, would have been a lot higher. There's still a lot of people in critical condition. I think there's still 25 people being treated. So I mean, that death toll could get higher. And there's a bit more about the background of this pair, where they'd been. So they'd actually been, we knew yesterday they'd been in the Philippines. There's questions about what they'd been doing there. We know that parts of the Philippines have been sort of tormented by ISIS. And what the intelligence sources are saying today is that they were there undergoing training in a terror camp. Right. Which obviously raises the question of other people travelling. If there's a terror camp, how many people are being trained in this place? Where are they coming from? Where are they going? If you remember, obviously decades ago, this sort of stuff was happening in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and slowly but surely those people who trained there went on to carry out atrocities in the West. So that's something that obviously our spooks, our MI5 security services will be looking at, I'm sure.
Fascinating. Lots of coverage of that in The Sun tomorrow and also at thesun.co.uk. Just tell us finally about Britain's luckiest couple, beating odds of 24 trillion to 1 to win the lottery twice.
Yeah. I hate them. I hate them.
I hate them too.
What are they doing? And also, we got this story at 7 o'clock in the morning as we're just, we've dusted off our cars, come in the freezer, we sit down and say, look, fair play to
lottery
them.
Twice.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
It seems like they keep playing the lottery despite having won the lottery. They've had this £1 million victory 7 years ago, and then they're going to scoop another million.
Yeah, well, so they won £1 million on this. If you do it, you'll know on the Euro Millions ticket you get a millionaire maker code, and they won £1 million on that. And they bought. Funny story, on the way to claim the ticket, their car broke down. Right. And they had to call the AA. So their first purchase ended up being a new car. They said, yes. Enough of that. Yes. And they bought the house they were living in. They bought cars for relatives. So I guess the £1 million it gave them a good safety net. Yes. They carried on working. I think the chap Richard Davis and his wife Faye, they both sort of retrained and changed their careers to something they wanted, to do a bit more.
A bit more of it.
But unbelievably, they had a lucky dip, November the 26th draw, and they matched 5 numbers in the bonus ball, and they won another £1 million. And they say, it just goes to show if you keep believing, anything's possible.
John's angry. I'm angry too. Shouldn't be allowed. No, we wish them all the very best, and they will be having a very Merry Christmas. John, thank you. That's John Lucas there from The Sun, their night news editor. Lots more to come. We'll have a chat with Kevin O'Sullivan as well about what's coming up on his programme, but he is here after 7 o'clock. And just on what I'm up to the rest of the week, I'll be in with Julia Hartley-Brewer in John's chair actually tomorrow, talking about the Prime Minister's questions at 12 o'clock. I'm doing breakfast on Thursday, mid-morning 10 to 1 on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, bring us right up to Christmas. Plenty to discuss, of course, then and now here on Talk.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's play a voice note from Nevin on the doctor strikes.
Where do they think wealth is actually created? And where do they think anywhere in the world people are getting the sort of pay rises that the junior doctors, as you quite rightly call them, are asking for? I mean, it absolutely defies belief. And the fact that people actually think like this and then come on a serious channel like yours and talk like this with such, frankly, economic illiteracy, just it absolutely blows my mind.
Thank you, Nevin, for that. Thanks also to Richard in Gloucester. He says, I hope Trump takes the BBC to the cleaners. I stopped paying my licence fee when they were so biased against Brexit. I haven't watched the BBC since. There's plenty to watch on catch up and on YouTube, and I've not missed their lefty viewpoint. The sooner they scrap the TV licence fee, the better. Martin says, without tradesmen, there would be no hospital. Our wages haven't gone up. I did a 5-year apprenticeship as a carpenter and 30 quid a week. Naff off, you entitled morons. Zarina says, I and many teachers I know cannot get a teaching job despite the so-called shortages. I'm living on a pittance, able to work as a support worker in school. It's shocking. I have masses of debt and I can't pay it off. Doctors are on a great salary. It is greed, pure greed. Zarina, I'm really sorry to hear about your circumstances. I hope they change soon, and people who really want to be teachers and those who want to educate our young people are desperately needed, because there's so many teachers who really aren't very good, and you sound like someone who has a real thirst to educate young people. Neil says, oh, so the hardest working pay more tax to support the worst health service in the world. And Tracy says, well done, Peter. You sure did give it to him about the doctor strikes. People will die because of these strikes. Tracy, I agree with you. I think that's absolutely correct. Maybe the doctors, maybe pay the doctors and then create them their own special tax code of 75% and take it all back them for the people who will die with their negligence. Tad in Cambridge also says, I wonder if the two main protagonists in Islam, Sunnis and Shias, will ever lead by example and reconcile their own differences. A peaceful religion must go to great lengths to constantly prove their credibility and demonstrate their willingness to coexist with others, says Tad. Just a few minutes to take a call from Mark in Lincolnshire. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say on this?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi there.
Hi there. I'll try and be as quick as I can. Yeah, I mean, basically what it is, the chap you were speaking to earlier, the Muslim chap who basically refuted you calling him a moderate Muslim, I think he's actually correct. You know, at the end of the day, the guy's just a Muslim. It's kind of, we always do this thing with Muslims. We always pigeonhole them into one of two different categories, which I think is wrong. I don't think moderate Muslims is a thing. I think it's nonsense. It makes me want to scream when I hear the term. Because the problem is, they're all separated. Well, they're not separated. They're all unified by one thing, which is Islam at the end of the day. Because I would throw things such as, the Batley Grammar School, the teacher that's still in hiding to this day. The parents that turned up essentially calling for his head. They were perfectly moderate Muslims until something triggered them, and then they decided to not be moderate anymore.
Couldn't you make that assumption about any religion, Mark?
Not in the same way, I don't think. No, I think.
Why not? Do you think?
Because Islam in itself, Peter, is littered with essentially persecution, subjugation, murder, and death to people who are not Muslim. That's the reality of Islam. I honestly can't find any other religion where it goes to such extreme lengths.
There's plenty of death in the Bible.
People.
There's plenty of vengeful action in the Bible, Mark.
In the Old Testament, yes. We mentioned this previously.
Yeah.
You know, there's certainly stuff in the Old Testament, which is why I don't follow particularly the Old Testament. It's the New Testament I'm interested in, because they're you know, that was Jesus' time.
Okay.
That I have an interest in. There's a lot of things you may find in, you know, Judaism that call for similar things to Islam, but they're not acted out in any way near the same way, are they, Peter? You know, at the end of the day, when we talk about moderate Muslims, you know, there's 35% of Muslims in this country, British Muslims, who want Sharia law. Do you consider Sharia law moderacy?
No, I don't. But I mean, there's plenty of violence in the New Testament too. I mean, the martyrdom of John the Baptist, Jesus' crucifixion, Stephen's martyrdom. I mean, we could talk about this all day. But listen, Mark, thank